Chapter 1503. Zixiao is too rash. How can the Nye camp still be rational? What if he really doesn't come back? Old Master Sun Wen was very worried about this. The current situation was very bad. Wei Ci running over would be courting death. He understood the logic of Wei Ci's analysis, but how could people worry so much when they were agitated? Not to mention other things, if one or two disobedient and hot-tempered generals wanted to use force, could Wei Ci escape unscathed? If he doesn't come back, more than 200,000 people will be buried with him. Zixiao is not at a disadvantage. Qiguan Rang took a sip of tea and said leisurely, since ancient times how many emperors have been buried alive with people, but not even this number. Besides, Zixiao is a loach, it's not easy to catch him. Sun Wen choked. He did not expect Qiguan Rang, who had always been single and unsociable, to crack a cold joke. Niel Yang's death is more or less related to the Lord. I'm afraid that going to mourn will be seen as a provocation. Although Old Master Sun Wen hated the Nye family, he felt it was a pity when he thought of Niel Yang's death. Qiguan Rang smiled coldly, it's human nature. Was Wei Ci really going to mourn sincerely? Don't be ridiculous. He mainly wanted to confirm if the person was really dead. He also had the intention of flaunting his strength and suppressing the Nye family. Normal people would not believe that a weasel marrying a chicken for 100 years was an act of kindness from the bottom of his heart. While the two were chatting, Wei Ci and his party arrived 2 miles away from the Nye camp and were stopped halfway. Who are you? The scouts of the Nye army looked at Wei Ci and the others with hostility, and faintly surrounded them. Wei Ci smiled and bowed while riding on the horse. We are here on the orders of our lord to mourn Duke Guangshan. When the Nye army scouts heard this, their faces turned livid and they wanted to draw their swords to kill. Wei Ci smiled faintly as if he did not see the shining blades. Instead, it was the soldiers who escorted him who came forward to protect him. When two armies fight, envoys are not to be killed. Today we are here on the orders of our lord to mourn Duke Guangshan, not to fight in front of the battlefield. Is it your idea or someone else's? Duke Guangshan has just passed away and you are ignoring military discipline? Wei Ci was so calm that he managed to subdue a few soldiers of the Nye army. They looked at each other and finally took a step back and sent someone to pass the message. When Ye Ying and the other hot-tempered generals heard this, they exploded in anger. What does Lu Shi mean? You've angered the previous master over and over again, and now you've sent some cheap slave soldiers to pretend to be nice? This general's scolding was not polite at all. The scholars frowned when they heard this. The price of a head was only 1 copper coin. Whether it was a slave or a soldier, both of them were the lowest class in society. Even if they were angry in their hearts, Jiang Pingji had the guts to send someone over. The status of the messenger was definitely not low. It was too hurtful to scold someone as a slave soldier with a high price. Another person gritted his teeth and said, just a moment ago they were playing tricks on us, angering our late lord to the point of dying of illness. Now they're sending people to offer their condolences and hold a funeral. Clearly they're taking advantage of our Nye family for granted. Get him to scram. If he dares to take even half a step into the former lord's mourning hall, I'll make him come in on his knees and roll out like a human swine. Some of the generals were even more hot-tempered. They carried weapons that weighed 30 to 40 kilograms and wanted to go out. Everyone, please wait a moment. I'll go chop off his head and offer it to the former master's spirit. Hearing that they were getting angrier as they spoke, Wei Yong, who was dressed in a plain mourning dress, berated them with an indifferent expression. Enough. Isn't it messy enough? Everyone had indignant expressions on their faces. They were all men of iron and steel. How could they endure the fact that the enemy was taking advantage of them? Wei Yong said, take care of the former master's funeral and stabilize the army's morale to prevent Lu Shi from taking the opportunity to make trouble. Only after these are done can the former master pass away with peace of mind. If you touch the messenger, Lu Shi won't care if the former master passes the 7th day of his death. Do you want to see a new scar on the former master's body before it's even cold? His words were so harsh that the few troublemakers did not dare to make trouble again. However, there were some who were unconvinced. If Lu Shi dares to send his troops, this general will dare to meet them head-on. The former master died unjustly. Do you still want to be humiliated by them after his death? The general straightened his neck and asked angrily, is the military advisor afraid of death? You know that the traitors have ill intentions, yet you still want to protect them? This isn't about being afraid of death. It's about looking at the bigger picture. Wei Yong had not slept well for 2 to 3 days. His face was abnormally pale, but he still forced himself to say, you can act like a hero for a while. If the former master's funeral can't be held, then you can lead the troops to fight Lu Shi. The general said mournfully, "Are you going to let them flaunt their strength in front of the former master's coffin?" Wei Yong said, "Not necessarily. If they come, they should offer incense and mourn. They should act like filial sons and grandsons." When the general heard this, he felt a little better. Wei Yong asked the messenger, "Who is the messenger Lu Shi sent?" The messenger replied, "This person's surname is Wei and his name is Ci. He claims to be Lu Shi's advisor." In an instant, everyone realized that Wei Yong's face was twisted. It was an indescribable expression. "Wei Ci, isn't this Zi Shun's younger brother?" As Niel Yang's right-hand man and close friend, Wei Yong's family connections had been completely uncovered. Many people who were on good or bad terms with him knew that Wei Yong had a third brother who was squatting on Lu Shi's side as an advisor. They had never imagined that the person who came to mourn this time would be Wei Ci. This time, someone laughed mockingly. "It looks like Lu Shi also knows what he's doing." Another person echoed, "That's true. If he didn't know what he was doing, why would he send Wei Ci over? Isn't it because he wants elder brother's protection?" Wei Yong said coldly, "If Wei Ci is the slightest bit disrespectful in front of the former master's coffin, he will definitely kill him himself." When these words were said, those who had other thoughts did not dare to say anything else. Before the former master Niel Yang died, he had entrusted young master Nie Qing to Wei Yong. Wei Yong was the young master's father-in-law and had a strong backing. Fan Chen said to Wei Yong in private, "I've made things difficult for you. Your younger brother is also insensible." Wei Yong said, "Zixiao has been a sensible child since he was young and has never caused anyone to worry about him. If he dares to come, he most likely has the confidence to escape unscathed." Fan Chen choked for a moment. "Who gave him the confidence to pull out his swords?" Wei Yong said in a muffled voice, "His elder brother." Because he understood his elder brother's character and knew that Wei Yong would consider the bigger picture, Wei Yong was certain that Wei Yong would not dare to let anything happen to him in front of Niel Yang's coffin. Fan Chen cast a sympathetic look at Wei Yong. With such a troublesome younger brother, Wei Yong was pitiful enough. Even though the smell of gunpowder was thick in the tent, when Wei Ci came over, the atmosphere was considered good. At least the expected scene of someone drawing a sword and rushing up to slash at him did not happen. When everyone saw the sword hanging from Wei Ci's waist, their faces immediately fell. This fellow was asking for a beating. As if they could read minds, Wei Ci stopped in front of the tent and unsheathed his sword before entering. Wei Ci first bowed to Nie Qing, then nodded his head in greeting to everyone. He took out the sacrificial items and placed them in front of the coffin. He knelt in front of the coffin and offered sacrifices. His every move was flawless. Ci came in a hurry and had not prepared the funeral oration. "I could only write it in a hurry. I hope young Lang Jun will forgive me." Chapter 1504. Wei Ci said that his funeral oration was written in a hurry, so they did not have any expectations for the content of the funeral oration. Funeral oration used for funerals were mostly articles expressing mourning, remembrance, and mourning for the deceased. The current funeral oration was mainly prose and four-character rhymes, and it was easy to recite. The content was basically to remember the deceased's life experiences, praise the deceased's character, and express grief. If there were any mistakes in the funeral oration, there was a high chance that Wei Ci would be stabbed to death in front of Niel Yang's coffin. The scholar standing in the corner looked at Wei Ci's respectful and devout attitude and sneered in his heart. He said in a low voice, he had never met the late master, how could he write a heartfelt funeral oration? It's hilarious. As mentioned earlier, the content of the funeral oration was related to the deceased's life experiences. If Wei Ci did not know Niel Yang, his writing would not be appropriate. Unbeknownst to him, Wei Ci had done some research on Niel Yang. After all, his brother Wei Dan from his previous life had written more than 10 funeral oration after Niel Yang's death, almost one every year. The year Wei Dan died of illness, he was bedridden with a cold and could not get up to attend the funeral. It was Wei Ci who went on his behalf. Wei Ci did not know Niel Yang well enough, but Wei Dan definitely did. He sorted out many letters for Wei Dan's funeral and found that most of the letters were written to his close friend Niel Yang. Some were funeral oration, some were ordinary letters, and some were long-winded chatter. "Last night, I dreamed of the past and suddenly realized that it has been 14 years since Guangshan passed away, and I am 47. Life is already half over, and the pear tree in front of the courtyard has bloomed and withered several times. Day and night, my mind is in a mess. Thinking of the first time I met you, you wore a black robe and a black crown, standing under the courtyard talking elegantly. Thinking of all the past now, it is as bright as before as if it was yesterday, your laughter and words still ring in my ears. Alas, Guangshan, the heavens do not give me false years. I die of old age, my heart aches. Libation. I mourn your early death, I also weep blood. Of course, these were all written by Wei Dan to Niel Yang as a friend. Wei Ci could not directly copy or he would reveal flaws. With detailed materials, it was not difficult to write a standard elegiac oration. Other than the crackling of the white candles burning in the tent, there was only the sound of Wei Ci's sincere recitation of the funeral rites. As the funeral rites began, everyone's irascible and irrepressible emotions seemed to have found an outlet to vent. Nie Qing even knelt in front of his father's coffin and cried until his face was covered in tears. After Wei Ci finished reciting, he gave a long bow. Regardless of whether it was the funeral oration or the etiquette, no one could find fault with it. Even if everyone wanted to make things difficult for him, they had no excuse. Someone secretly wiped his tears and sneered, was it really written in a hurry and not someone ghost wrote it? What interaction did Wei Ci have with Niel Yang? The contents of the funeral oration were all true. This level of understanding was definitely not superficial. They must have been close friends. Someone berated in a low voice. Stop talking. Don't be presumptuous in front of the deceased Lord's spirit. I know you're not happy with Wei Zixuan, but you can't simply accuse him. After Wei Ci entered the tent, his every move was under our eyes. Did the two brothers communicate at all? Not only did they not communicate, but Wei Ci did not even look at Wei Ci once, let alone act as his gunman. Kneeling in front of the spirit, Nie Qing wiped his tears. It took him a while to calm his sorrowful mood. He asked Wei Ci in a hoarse voice, "Does your lord have any instructions?" Before Niel Yang passed away due to illness, out of consideration of morality and benevolence, Jiang Pingji could not mobilize troops before the 7th day of his death. Otherwise she would be nailed to history and be reviled. No matter how great the hatred was, according to the tradition of the deceased, no matter how big the matter was, it had to be moved to the end of the funeral. Wei Ci said, "My lord instructed me to come here to pay my respects. My every move must be respectful and not the slightest bit negligent or rude." Nie Qing sneered and ignored Wei Ci's Tai Chi excuse. What else? Wei Ci said, "Stop fighting for now. Young Langjun helped the spirit back." Nie Qing did not speak, but Wei Ci said, "Regarding the matter of helping the spirit, the young lord has his own plans. There's no need for an outsider to help him plan. The Duke of Lanting is willing to send Zixiao to pay his respects. Whether it's sincere or not, he's up to no good. He's taking advantage of the fact that there's no one in the Nie family. After 7 days, let the Duke of Lanting wait. The enmity of the late lord's death can't be let go just like that. Please pass on these words, Zixiao." Wei Ci sighed and stood up. He knew that such a situation would happen. In his previous life, Niel Yang died early and his elder brother died of depression. Naturally, the two brothers had no conflicts and had always been respectful. This life was different. Niel Yang walked to the front of the stage and Wei Ci assisted from the side. Niel Yang's death had something to do with his lord, so the relationship between the two brothers became tense. However, Wei Ci did not regret it. They were still brothers, but they had different standpoints. "I will pass on every word to the lord." Wei Ci glanced at Wei Ci out of the corner of his eye. His eyes were surging with complicated emotions that outsiders could not understand. Wei Ci said in a low voice, "Brother, why do you have to do this?" Niel Yang had just died. The internal strife in the Nie family was fierce. More than 200,000 troops squatted at Zhanjiang Pass and fought to the death. If the power in the rear changed and their rations were cut off, Wei Ci and the others would be in a desperate situation. Don't think that the Nie family and the others couldn't do it. What couldn't those people do? Wei Ci asked him, "Judge others by yourself. If the person lying in the coffin today was the Duke of Lanting, you would know why." Wei Ci was speechless and could only choose to remain silent. "Brother, take care." Before Wei Ci left, he glanced at Niel Yang lying in the coffin. After bidding farewell to Nie Qing, he turned and left. Seeing Wei Ci leave, everyone held their breath and almost couldn't breathe. Nie Qing said, "Father-in-law, what should we do now?" Wei Ci was a step behind and followed beside Nie Qing. He said calmly, "The late lord made thorough arrangements when he was alive. Young lord, don't worry. The obstacles in Nie Qing's path would be swept clean." The days of keeping vigil were tough. The white banners and mourning cloaks fluttered in the wind. The originally unstable morale of the soldiers had been stabilized by Niel Yang's death. Wuxia continued to use his methods. Not only did the soldiers not lose their will to fight, but they were determined to fight to the death because of their grief. Because Nie Qing had lost his father, he had eaten very little for several days. He looked pale and weak and he had suffered a lot. Nie Yang could only persuade him to eat a little. If he didn't eat, Nie Yang would accompany him silently. Sigh. Looking at Nie Qing's back, which was unsteady on his knees, Nie Yang sighed in his heart. This Nie Yang is really ruthless. He even hid it from his son. In reality, there were only two people who knew that Nie Yang was still alive. One was Wuxia and the other was Fan Qin. Both of them were old foxes. During the vigil, the two of them cried bitterly as if their father had died. The system laughed coldly. They wait for people like you who are ambitious and can't hold back. Nie Yang secretly glanced at Wuxia's tent. Does he really not have many days left? Chapter 1505. After returning to the tent, Wei Ling restrained the sadness on his face and his gaze was once again filled with warmth. Nie Yang, who should have been lying in the coffin, was sleeping lightly on his bed. Nie Yang faintly opened his eyes when he heard the sound of footsteps approaching, and he heaved a sigh of relief in his heart after confirming the identity of the person that had arrived. What's the situation outside? Wei Yong said in a low voice. Everything is going smoothly. We've sent people back in secret, and those obstacles will be eliminated one by one. Thinking back to the dangers of that day, Wei Yong broke out in a cold sweat. Nie Yang fainted. After the doctor took his pulse, he confirmed that his breathing and pulse had stopped. Wei Qiong cried for a long time. He and Fan Qin wiped the body of the late master and changed his clothes. Unexpectedly, Nie Yang coughed softly and slowly woke up. Even though Nie Yang had crawled back from the gates of hell, his body was already unable to bear the burden. He finally made up his mind to pave the way for Nie Qing. Those who obstructed Nie Qing and the Nie clan had to die. The corpses in the coffins were easy to deal with. Nie Yang had Death Warrior shadow guards by his side. Their appearance and figure were similar to his, and with a little disguise, they could pass off as genuine and deceive people. Unless it was a relative or someone who had been in contact with the corpse for a long time, it would be difficult to tell that the corpse in the coffin was fake. Once Nie Yang really died, he would be able to exchange it with the corpse in the coffin. Even if Wuxia was reborn, the number of times he had really interacted with Nie Yang could be counted on one hand, and he did not discover any clues at all. In order to keep it a secret, the only people who knew were Wei Yong and Fan Qin, even Nie Qing. It was not that Nie Yang was heartless to hide it from his son. It was only because he knew that Jiang Pingji would send someone to pay her respects and to test if he was really dead. If Nie Qing knew the truth, the possibility of him being exposed was too high. Since that was the case, it was better to keep it a secret and wait for the dust to settle before Wei Yong told him the truth. Nie Yang sneered, I'm afraid they're going to celebrate and hold a banquet to celebrate that I've finally been taken away by the King of Hell. Wei Yong suppressed his heartache, his expression cold. Those people won't live for long. Nie Yang smiled and said, That's true. If the people I sent were faster, they might even be ahead of me. Wei Yong looked at his friend's haggard and weak appearance and felt extremely depressed. Just by looking at Nie Yang's current appearance, who would be able to imagine that he was once the noble son of a gentry clan that was renowned in the capital and possessed peerless elegance? Nie Yang saw the forbearance under his expression and suddenly revealed a faint smile. It's not that I don't remember the promises I made with Zi Shun. It's just that the heavens don't give us false years. You and I are mere mortals, how can we go against the heavens? Nie Yang consoled him. The ancients often said that man can conquer the heavens. How can we know that we are not obeying the heavens? Perhaps Nie Yang was born with a short lifespan. In the future, if Liang Zhen unfortunately passes away, Zi Shun shouldn't be too sad. If after death his spirit sees Zi Shun being implicated by a good person, his heart will not be at ease. Wei Yong said, If it weren't for this vile person causing mischief and poisoning you, how could you be like this? Getting to the bottom of it, the symptom lies in the Nie family. As long as I carry the identity, I will never be free. Nie Yang said, If there's a next life, I'd like to be a commoner and live in seclusion. I'd like to make 2 or 3 friends and go to banquets when I'm free. I'd like to not be bound by the secular world. Even without this vile person poisoning him, there would be another vile person causing mischief and assassinating him in the future. Ever since old Master Nie seized power and stirred up endless internal strife in the Nie family, Nie Yang had seen through this point. Unless the problem was solved from the root, what was bound to happen would still happen. Wei Yong's eyes were bloodshot and filled with tears. Nie Yang knew his good friend's temperament well. These words couldn't resolve him. If a few words could, then Wei Yong wouldn't be Wei Yong. If there's a next life, Yong will still be Guangshan's close friend. You and I will look at the moon in the wind, burn incense and boil wine and talk about the world. That will be enough. Nielyang laughed. You're really stubborn. Isn't it enough to be burdened by a good person for a lifetime? You want to compensate for a second life. If Nielyang hadn't taken the initiative to befriend him, Wei Yong would most likely still be that refined scholar sitting peacefully by the window reading poetry and books. He wouldn't have been involved in the Nie family's internal strife and the world's struggle. Nielyang felt very guilty when he mentioned this. He had let everyone down except Wei Yong down. If Wei Yong held a grudge because of his death for the rest of his life, he wouldn't be at ease even if he closed his eyes. Wei Yong didn't think it was bad. If the regrets in this life could be fulfilled in the next life, it would be a blessing. After saying so much, Nielyang was mentally exhausted. He couldn't resist the exhaustion of his body and fell into a deep sleep. On the other side, Wei Ci returned after paying his respects. He maintained a contemplative expression along the way until Zhanjiang Pass came into view. Jiang Pingji was relieved when she saw Wei Ci return in good condition. She began to ask about serious matters. Is Nie Guangshan really dead? Wei Ci said, the corpse in the coffin is indeed him. Everyone's performance is flawless. Jiang Pingji sighed. This dear friend received his bento so quickly. He finished filming in just a few scenes. It's really beyond my expectations. I don't even know if I should continue bullying his son. I keep feeling like I'm bullying him. By the way, they didn't make things difficult for you, did they? Wei Ci had already learned to automatically filter out words that he didn't understand, such as finished filming and received his bento. They didn't make things difficult for me, but their morale didn't collapse with Nielyang's death. Instead, they seemed to be united against a common enemy. Wei Ci was also a smart person. If outsiders wanted to make things difficult for him, they really needed to be capable. If Nielyang is dead, then so be it. He's still causing trouble for me. Jiang Pingji crossed her arms in front of her chest and said, did they have anything for you to say? The morale that had collapsed due to grief and indignation condensed. Nielyang was forcibly prolonging his life. Wei Ci completely repeated Wei Lian's words. Jiang Pingji sneered and said, what do they mean? Are they waiting for Nielyang to come out of his grave and challenge him for revenge? Wei Ci sighed and said, that's most likely what they mean. Then I'll fulfill their wish. I hope that Nielyang's coffin will be buried by then. Otherwise it won't look good if it's dug out. As a face tank, Jiang Pingji's ability to attract hatred was indeed incomparable to that of ordinary people. If Wei Lian and the others knew about this, they would draw their swords and fight her to the death. What did she mean? She was just short of saying that she wanted to dig out Nielyang's corpse and whip it or expose it to the wilderness. The corner of Wei Ci's mouth twitched. He always felt that it was not without reason that his lord was hated so much. When one was her enemy, not only would one's body be tortured, but one's spirit would also be attacked many times. Nielyang's psychological quality was already high enough, but his lord was too good at infuriating people. Her series of actions could anger people to death. Because of Nielyang's funeral, the two armies were busy with their own matters and did not make a big move. At the same time, the Nie family of Zhongzhou received the news of Nielyang's death at the first instance. For a moment, people's hearts wavered and waves surged in the dark. Great, Nie Guangshan's death is really wonderful. He's gone. How can Ye Qing protect the Nie family business by himself? In the end, won't we have to step in? Otherwise, the Nie family will be swallowed alive by the feudal lords. Chapter 1506. Nielyang was perhaps a complete tragedy. When he passed away, other than his wife and mother who would sincerely grieve for him, the other relatives would look solemn and sorrowful, but when they returned to the house, they couldn't help but laugh and celebrate. Among these people, even his father was among them. The relationship between father and son was so thin. Although Nielyang was the son of the first wife, he wasn't his father's favorite son, nor was he his father's favorite successor. When he stood up to seize the Nie clan, Nielyang's father had been sullen, vaguely viewing this son as an enemy. In his view, Nielyang wasn't suitable to inherit the family business, and this son wasn't the successor he had personally raised, so what right did he have to take over the Nie clan? Compared to his eldest son Nielyang, who was quite opinionated, he preferred his youngest son, who was obedient, sensible and filial. Ever since he was young, he had personally taken care of this youngest son, whether it was his studies or his life. He was also the son who was most like him in his heart. Fathers always preferred children that resembled themselves. Although he didn't like Nye Liang, he still felt some pity for his eldest son's death. If Nye Liang was alive, he could still support his younger brother in the future. Don't cry. Do you want other families to laugh at us? Father Nye couldn't speak his mind, and he had to pretend to be grieving for his son. He finally had a break, but when he returned home, he still had to listen to his wife sobbing. He was very upset. The wife stopped crying and faintly said, "My son is gone and I'm not allowed to grieve for him? Your father is really ruthless." Having his thoughts seen through, Father Nye felt as though his secret had been exposed. He couldn't help but fly into a rage out of humiliation. Women don't know anything. What else can you do besides cry? Nye Liang's father didn't want to listen to his wife's crying, so he simply got up and went to sleep in his beloved concubine's room. He didn't know how many people died in their dreams that night. The Nye clan was filled with the smell of blood and a haze that couldn't be dispersed. It was late at night, but many people didn't feel sleepy. The news of Nye Liang's death gave them a chance to reshuffle. Those uncles and elders who were suppressed by Nye Liang were also eager to try. They all summoned their aides and guests over, preparing to spend the night discussing how to maximize the benefits. However, before they had time to discuss anything, black shadows broke in as if there was no one around. Someone with sharp ears heard the commotion and shouted sternly, "Who's there sneaking around?" The sound of footsteps could be heard as men dressed in black rushed in one after another. They were all holding sharp sabers in their hands. How could the crowd not know what was going on? They all shouted, "Assassin!" Unfortunately, the speed of the reinforcements could not keep up with the speed of the assassins. One by one they lined up to report to Yen Luo Dian. Some of them had learned martial arts and were able to draw their swords to defend themselves, but they could not withstand the massacre of this group of desperados. Why is it so noisy outside? There were also some who had already taken off their clothes and rested. Not long after, they were awakened by the commotion. As soon as they opened their eyes, they vaguely saw a black shadow standing in front of their beds. They were instantly scared out of their wits. Without waiting for him to call out, the assassin raised his hand and chopped off his neck. Blood splattered all over the ground. The same situation played out in different places. None of the ambitious members of the Nye clan's direct line or collateral line were spared. The next day the news spread like wildfire. Those who were lucky enough to survive almost wet their pants in fright. Their bodies were drenched in cold sweat and they were glad that they had survived. Panic, fear, relief, anger, their complicated feelings were mixed together into a ball, causing their hearts to feel stuffy, and their hands and feet to feel icy cold. Who do you think did this? As soon as he said this, the rest of them looked at each other. They did not dare to voice out their guesses for fear that they would be killed. After a while, one of the Nye clan members said, "Most likely, perhaps an enemy?" His answer was disdainful. This large-scale assassination was too sudden. The enemy had obviously planned this for a long time and had planted informants around the target. That was the reason why this assassination was so swift and clean, and it didn't give anyone the chance to rescue or escape at all. How could a sudden idea have such an effect? Apart from that, the identity of the people who died last night was also worth investigating. The person who set up this assassination must be very familiar with the internal power structure of the Nye clan, the identity of the members, and the location of their residences. After thinking about it, there seemed to be only one possibility. At this moment, someone suddenly said, "Don't forget what happened to these people before they died." What happened? Everyone sweated profusely when they heard this. The news of Nye Liang's death had just arrived, and a large number of Nye clan members who had threatened Nye Liang and his son died that night. Not only within the Nye clan, some of the leaders of the forces that were attached to the Nye clan were also warned. It was easy to imagine who was the one who did this. No, didn't Ye Guangshan die? Could it be that the news was fake and they were deliberately deceiving us? It's not that they were deceiving us. Did you forget that Nye Guangshan had several loyal lackeys around him? Nye Guangshan's plans were meticulous and ruthless. In order for his son to stand firm, he might have instructed his lackeys to clean up a group of eyesores before he died. Among those who died last night, which one of them was content with their lot? Someone said timidly in a low voice. He's not afraid that someone will rebel? So many members of the Nye clan died at once. Wasn't Nye Liang afraid that they would rebel? Of course Nye Liang was not afraid. Using this wave of cleansing, he had also cleaned up the hidden dangers within the Nye clan and once again regained the authority he had lost. As long as Nye Qing was not muddle-headed and had Wei Yong, Fan Qin, and a few other trusted aides by his side, Nye Qing would definitely be able to protect the Nye clan. Of course, Nye Liang did not intend to bear the responsibility of killing the elders of the same clan. Nielyang had long thought about who would be the scapegoat. Zishuan, is Nielyang still obedient? Wei Yong said in a low voice, he's been calm these days and there are no flaws. If it wasn't for the Lord's vigilance, I'm afraid we wouldn't have expected Nielyang to hide so deeply. With such a scheming mind, I'm afraid he's plotting something big. I don't know what other tricks he has up his sleeve. To be safe, Nielyang asked Wei Yong to bring his son Nie Qing to the front line. Nie Qing then brought Nielyang over. Nielyang was not very wary of his nephew Nielyang. He had investigated Nielyang long ago. There was nothing to suspect about this child. He was timid and harmless. There was no harm in keeping him by his son's side. After that, Nielyang's nightmare called the police, allowing Nie Qing to avoid Jiang Pingji's assassination. This instead aroused Nielyang's suspicions. Nielyang did not believe in ghosts and gods. He would always be suspicious of such mythical coincidences. Nie Qing trusted Nielyang too much. This made Nielyang secretly suspicious. After thinking about it, he sent someone to thoroughly investigate Nielyang. Because Nielyang had been brought to the front line by Nie Qing, there were only servants guarding the house at the back. After a carpet search, the people sent out quickly found a suspicious secret compartment in Nielyang's study. Chapter 1507. After inspection, this powder was exactly the same as the poison Nielyang had been poisoned with in his early years. Not only was Nielyang unable to accept this result, even Wei Yong felt it was too absurd. How old was Nielyang when Nielyang was poisoned? He was at most 10 years old, a child. What ability did he have to do it so flawlessly? If Nielyang had not been careful enough to investigate Nielyang, he would not have been able to discover that hidden compartment, much less find the culprit behind the poisoning. Even if Nielyang was not the real culprit, he could not escape being involved in the poisoning. Nielyang laughed self-deprecatingly, the corners of his lips curling into a mocking smile. Hunting wild geese all day only to be pecked blind by the geese. To think that I prided myself on being smart, yet I was schemed against by a junior, truly laughable. Ever since Nielyang found out that he had been poisoned, he had rescreened the people around him and secretly sent people to investigate the poisoning. However, no matter how he investigated, he could not find the culprit. Following the clues he had, he would only find a few uncles in the end. However, Nielyang knew that although these uncles had the motive to poison him, they did not have the time to act. Therefore, the person who harmed him was still hiding behind the scenes. Nielyang had never let down his guard, who knew that a new clue would appear and he would be caught off guard. Nielyang was younger than Nie Qing, so why would Nielyang suspect him? After discovering that there was something wrong with Nielyang did not get rid of him immediately. Firstly, he was worried about his son Nie Qing. Secondly, he felt that Nielyang was really strange and it was not good to alert the enemy before figuring it out. Thirdly, being schemed against, he had to collect some interest. Nielyang planned to push the blame of killing an elder of the same clan onto Nielyang to clear his suspicions. This way, his son Nie Qing could see this person's true face. Wei Yong said, I really don't know how he could have so many schemes at such a young age. He's even more shrewd than an old fox. The moment those greedy and ambitious old foxes of the Nie clan heard that Nielyang was dead, they could not hold back their ambitions. They never thought that Nielyang would be able to suppress his nature. To be able to do this, either Nielyang was innocent and they suspected that he had been mistaken, or Nielyang's mind was so deep that ordinary people could not deal with him, or could Nielyang have already guessed that Lord Nielyang was not dead? Wei Yong voiced out his conjecture. Nielyang said, what's the point of investigating this now? My body can't hold on for more than a few days. I really have the heart but not the strength. Nielyang is indeed very scheming, it's a pity, otherwise he could be Qing'er's right-hand man. Nielyang was quite satisfied with his son, except for one thing, Nie Qing was too pure and kind. This kind of personality was nothing in a flourishing age. Nielyang could protect him to become a noble son of a landowning family. But now it was troubled times. Even with Wei Dan and the others assisting him, Nielyang was still worried. If it wasn't for the fact that he was too pure and easy to bully, Nielyang wouldn't have had the chance to get close to him. Now their relationship was so good that it was as if Jiao could never leave Meng and Meng could never leave Jiao. Since he was sure that Nielyang was a hidden danger, Nielyang planned to secretly send people to get rid of him. He wouldn't be able to see these things, but Wei Yong would help him achieve them, and the ending would be similar. Wei Yong said, this kind of person cannot be left for long. It's best to eradicate him as soon as possible. Whether it was Nielyang or Wei Yong, they were both cautious people, not to mention that Nielyang was already dead. Logically, other than them, no one else knew about this conversation, But they didn't know that Nye Yang's ability was close to that of a spiritual monster, and couldn't be measured with common sense. Nye Yang knew that Nye Yang wasn't dead, so he didn't dare to let his guard down, and often let the system keep an eye on him. Of course, this conversation was heard by Nye Yang as well. The system sneered, "Now you know the difference between you and Nye Yang, right? If I didn't help you, you wouldn't even know how you died." Nye Yang's face was hidden in the shadows, but his eyes shot out a cold light, and his murderous intent spilled everywhere. The system said relentlessly, "If I didn't help you, you wouldn't have been able to poison Nye Yang. Even if you succeeded, you would have been easily caught by him. If I didn't help you, you wouldn't have been able to restrain your ambitions when Nye Yang faked his death, and he could have gotten rid of you. If I didn't help you, now you wouldn't even know that Nye Yang already had murderous intent towards you, and was prepared to use you before sending someone to kill you. You still don't dare to admit it? You're just a mortal. No matter how scheming you are, you can't compare to my ability." Nye Yang's previous attempt to turn the tables had made the system extremely annoyed, and now it was going all out to attack him. The system also knew that Nye Yang was scheming, but no matter how scheming he was, if he didn't have the ability to realize it, it would just be a joke. Taking advantage of this, the system wanted Nye Yang to completely understand his own weight, so that he would obediently surrender and not challenge the system's authority. "This is a death trap. You'll die if you're not careful, and Nye Qing won't be able to protect you. If he finds out that you're the real murderer of his father, do you think your brotherly relationship with Nye Qing will matter? Now, the only person you can rely on is me." The system laughed maliciously, like a demon whispering in Nye Yang's ear, tempting him to fall deeper into the abyss. After a while, Nye Yang laughed foolishly. His expression was still cold, but his eyes were filled with madness and murderous intent. "Rely on you?" Nye Yang couldn't help but laugh, and he said, "Nye Yang wants to kill me? Are you some kind of saint?" Until now, he could not forget the lightning torture the system gave him, where he could neither live nor die. With the system's attitude, how could Nye Yang believe that it was kind to him? From Nye Yang's perspective, the system was also an evil spirit hiding in the dark and plotting something. When the system achieved its goal, Nye Yang might end up worse than death. The system laughed sinisterly, "I can at least let you live for a few days. You don't want to die without tasting power, do you?" It had been bound to Nye Yang for so many years. It knew very well about Nye Yang's obsession with power, almost to the point of being possessed. Nye Yang was silent for a long time after listening to the system. As he struggled in his heart, his young face became twisted and sinister. The system laughed, "Have you thought it through?" Nye Yang asked it, "Do you have a way to turn the tables?" Nye Yang and Wei Si started to suspect Nye Yang. Nye Yang didn't think that he could turn the tables. This was a dead end. The system said, "Yes, of course. The person who's going to die is Nye Yang anyway. What if you're not, Nye Yang?" Nye Yang frowned. He didn't know what sinister trick the system had come up with. "You mean, you want me to disguise myself as someone else and find a substitute to die for me? That's not easy." Wei Si and the others weren't familiar with him. They could find someone who looked 70 or 80% similar to him to fool them, but Nye Qing would definitely be able to recognize him. Unless the system had the ability to find someone who looked exactly like him, with the exact same height and body shape. As expected of a mortal's thinking, the system is omnipotent. Back then, I could secretly poison you, so naturally I have the ability to help you out of danger. Speaking of which, if it wasn't for you acting smart and keeping a tail on me, Nye Yang wouldn't have suspected you even if he died. The system sneered, "I have something in my hands that can perfectly turn you into someone else, and at the same time, make someone else perfectly turn into you. With your rotten heart, you should be able to understand what I mean, right?" Chapter 1508. What do you mean by that? Nye Yang's voice was trembling, like sandpaper rubbing against glass. There was a hint of resistance in his voice. The system could not be bothered with Nye Yang's nonsense. How could the system not know how black-hearted this kid was? If he couldn't bear to pretend now, what was he doing earlier? The system laughed mockingly. "Host, don't you think it's too late for you to pretend to be a saint? Forget, you don't know what a saint is. A saint is a good person. Nye Qing is closer to the side. You won't even have that word in your next life. In terms of the darkness of the human heart, even the system can't compare to you. What did I mean just now? Do you dare touch your non-existent conscience and say you don't understand?" The system's words were full of sarcasm, causing Nye Yang's face to turn green and white. Selfishly, Nye Yang did not have much feelings for Nye Qing, but he was not that cruel either. He planned to let Nye Qing live. However, the system was far more cruel than he was and wanted to swap their identities. This way, Nie Qing would take the blame for Nie Yang and die in the hands of his father, Nie Liang, and father-in-law Wei Yong. This way of dying. Nie Liang was so angry that he wanted to crawl back from hell, much less Nie Qing. Nie Yang sat paralyzed and hesitated for a long time before asking tiredly, "Other than this, is there no other way?" The system said, "I only have this one method. Use it if you want. I won't wait for it to expire." Looking at the flickering candlelight, Nie Yang suddenly laughed foolishly, as if he had been relieved of some burden and fell into an even deeper abyss. "I understand. What do you want me to do?" He should have known that the system had ill intentions and would drag him into a hopeless situation sooner or later. It was too late to regret now. Nie Yang was already forced into a corner by Nie Liang. If he did not use the system's suggestion, he would not be able to break out of this hopeless situation. If he was merciful to Nie Qing, he would be cruel to himself. Years of planning and effort would be for naught. After thinking about it, Nie Yang still chose himself. Those who wanted to achieve great things did not bother with trifles. When necessary, he could even abandon his own parents and brothers, much less a cousin. Nie Liang secretly killed several of his uncles and drugged old Master Nie, causing him to become paralyzed and demented. Wasn't that also cruel and ruthless? Just as he was thinking, a slight movement came from outside. Nie Yang's mind sounded the alarm, and a hint of fierceness appeared in his eyes. Nie Yang's originally clear voice became hoarse from crying, but the smile in his eyes did not diminish. Familiar footsteps came over. Nie Qing's originally clear voice had become hoarse from crying, but the smile in her words did not diminish. Nie Yang quickly adjusted his expression and returned to his gentle and harmless self, standing up. "Brother, why are you here?" Nie Qing said, "I heard from the soldiers that you haven't eaten much for 2 days. This brother had the kitchen make some appetizers for you. You must be tired from keeping vigil for your father these days. Even if you have a bad appetite, you should at least eat something to fill your stomach." "A yang?" "He yang nye of yang. He was a long. He never of. Yang. No, nothing. It's just that I really have no appetite right now. Yang eat, of yang nye of yang of I. Yang is not to nye. I have of. Yang with, Nie Yang said. Yang of it of, Yang you. You not. Nie Yang could not argue with him and ate the food like it tasted like wax. Seeing that Nie Qing was defenseless, Yang felt complicated. Nie Qing read military books and learned new things. Nie Yang asked the system, "What's your idea? Could it be a possession in the novels?" The system smiled lazily. "No, I can do what you said, but it's too much effort. For a soul, a body born from a mother's womb is the most suitable. You and Nie Qing exchange souls. The biggest possibility is that both of you will become sickly and die early because of the instability of your soul. My idea is to disguise yourself. This disguise can change your appearance to that of the other." The system was in a good mood, so it spoke more. "You and Nie Qing are inseparable. You know his hobbies, relationships, habits, conversation style. It's not difficult to disguise yourself, and the possibility of being seen through is low. Wei Yong may be Nie Qing's father-in-law, but they don't have much contact, so their understanding is limited. As long as you don't make any fatal mistakes, Wei Yong may be suspicious, but at most he will think it's because of the death of his father. Don't you think this idea is perfect? With Nie Qing's identity, you'll be the rightful young master. Everything will be at your fingertips." Actually, thinking about it, Nie Yang's previous schemes were just messing around. If Nie Yang had taken advantage of Nie Qing's young age and unstable personality to take his identity, why would he need to plot against Nie Liang? The system's methods could easily smooth a rough road, but mortals could not. A bitter smile appeared on Nie Yang's face. It was indeed at his fingertips. At the same time, his fear of the system increased. To Nie Yang, the system and Nie Liang were both swords hanging over his head. The difference was that Nie Liang's sword was about to fall, and his death was near, but the system did not know. They were all enemies. Nie Yang was not someone who was willing to be enslaved. Even if the system used force to make him submit, his rebellious nature was still there. After 2 hours, Nie Qing prepared to leave, but Nie Yang urged him to stay. "It's getting late. Why don't you rest here, brother?" Nie Qing smiled. "That's good too. We haven't talked at night in a long time." Their brotherly love was deep. Wei Dan was the one with the most pain in the ass. He knew that there was something wrong with Nie Yang, but he could not tell his son-in-law. Fortunately, Nie Yang was surrounded by spies. If he dared to make the slightest movement, what awaited him would be his head. Time passed quickly. Nye Yang's death passed in the blink of an eye. As the eldest son of the first wife, Nye Qing should return to his hometown and let Nye Yang return to his roots. Wei Dan said, "The front lines can still be delayed for a while. Young master can rest assured. After the funeral of the late master is settled, we will take revenge for the late master." Nye Qing was hesitant. "Father passed away and we don't know what the situation is like in the clan. I'm afraid there will be a storm of blood when we return," Wei Dan said. "Before the late master passed away, he already made proper arrangements. Young master does not need to worry." Nye Qing did not think that his father would even worry about this. An indescribable sorrow welled up in his heart, and his eyes reddened. "Right, this subject wants to borrow someone from young master." "Who?" Wei Dan said, "Nye Yang." "Why does father-in-law want to borrow Yang? He is usually very lazy and leisurely. If father-in-law wants him to do something, don't have too much hope." Nye Qing smiled. "Fortunately he is still young and has good talent. With more experience he can become a talent who can take charge of things. Father-in-law should teach him more." Wei Dan felt his stomach ache when he heard this. At the same time he became more wary. Nye Yang's thoughts were as deep as the sea. Although Nye Qing was kind and romantic, he did not lack any brains. He could hide it from Nye Qing and maintain such a good relationship. It could be seen that he could act. Chapter 1509. As a bugged listening device, the system had a firm grasp of Nye Yang, Wei Yong and the others' movements and conversations. Knowing the two's plan, the system gloated at Nye Yang. They're about to make a move. Wei Yong plans to let Nye Qing help his spirit back and found an excuse to make you stay. If you want to make a move and switch identities, you have to do it within these 2 days. Otherwise you won't have a chance. After spending some time to get used to it, Nye Yang was no longer as resistant and uncomfortable as before. "I know. To be safe, I plan to make a move on the last night." If he changed his identity earlier, Nye Qing would definitely cause a ruckus and ruin his plan. It would be better to switch identities on the last night. When Nye Qing woke up, what awaited him would be his father-in-law's butcher knife. Thinking of that situation, Nye Yang laughed until tears came out of his eyes. The system was secretly speechless at Nye Yang's ruthlessness. On the last night of helping the spirit home, Nye Yang found an excuse to stay in Nye Qing's tent. The two brothers talked about many things that night. Not long after, Nye Qing fell asleep. Nye Yang, who was pretending to sleep, opened his eyes. He took out 2 pills the size of longans from his sleeves. These were the appearance change pills that the system had given him. After asking about the method to use it, the system gave him a bottle of sleeping powder that could make people fall into a deep sleep with just a sniff. For the appearance change pills to work, the target's blood had to be taken and mixed with it to be consumed. Nye Qing wasn't in a deep sleep. If the blood was taken directly, it might wake him up. Nye Yang's hands trembled as he cut Nye Qing's finger and stabbed himself. He mixed Nye Qing's blood with pills and swallowed it. Not long after, his slender body became more plump, his skin squirming like it was alive, making people's hair stand on end. When the squirming subsided, Nye Yang stood up and looked in the mirror. The person in the mirror was Nye Qing's face. As expected, just where did the system come from? How could it have such a treacherous method? Not only the face, figure, skin, even the eyes and aura were the same as Nye Qing's. The system reminded, as the saying goes, one's appearance comes from one's heart. You have to control your heart. Otherwise you'll be easily discovered. The only reason why Nye Yang looked so similar right now was because of the miraculous effects of the transfiguration pill. Once Nye Yang got used to it, his temperament would also change and he would eventually reveal his flaws. However, this was nothing. Nye Yang took Nye Qing's place to carry the spirit back. For the time being they were separated from Wei Yong. That old fox would not discover them. Nye Yang's eyelids drooped. "I understand. I'll be careful." He fed the other pill to Nye Qing. Nye Qing fell into a deep sleep, and Nye Yang watched as Nye Qing's face turned into his. After ensuring that there were no mistakes, Nye Yang went back to sleep. However, he tossed and turned, unable to fall asleep. He stayed up until dawn. That night, not only did Nye Yang not sleep well, Wei Yong was also in no mood to sleep. "Master." Wei Yong suppressed his sobs and held Nye Yang's hands that were almost as thin as bones tightly in an attempt to keep him awake. Nye Yang was already on the verge of death, but somehow, a surge of vitality surged through his almost dried-up body, giving him the strength to finish his sentence. "Zishan, take good care of Chinger. If there's anything wrong, Just scold and teach. Niel Yang felt that his vitality was quickly draining away. He subconsciously held Wei Yong's hands tightly and said, "The Nye family, if we can't save them, let them be." Niel Yang had sacrificed his life for the Nye family, but he could not let his friend fall because of him. Wei Yong naturally nodded his head and agreed to whatever Niel Yang said. "Yang has a close friend like you. This life is not a loss." The last few words were said with his mouth. Wei Yong said, "This subject feels the same." After he answered, he found that Niel Yang had already closed his eyes and his raised hands had loosened their grip. His heart thumping, Wei Yong knelt beside the bed and stared blankly for a long time before he reacted. He leaned to the side and suppressed his sobs. Not long after, Fan Shin came late. Seeing Wei Yong's situation, how could he not guess? Black shadows appeared in front of him and he almost fainted. "Zisha. Master's funeral matters?" Fan Shin took a step forward and almost stumbled to the ground. Only then did he find that his legs were so weak that he had no strength. "Act according to the plan." Wei Yong suppressed his grief with difficulty and said hoarsely, "Master has not gone far. Do not let him worry." The trap had been set and they were just waiting for the prey to take the bait. At the first glimmer of dawn, Nye Yang stood up and neatly dressed Nye Qing's morning clothes. He gave a flawless smile in the mirror. However, today was the day to support the spirit back, so there was no need to smile. Therefore, Nye Yang changed his expression to one of grief and silence and strode away. Walking out of the tent, Nye Yang glanced back and finally steeled his heart to turn and leave. "Father-in-law." Nye Yang respectfully called out to Wei Yong. The two were father and son-in-law, but they were also ruler and subject. Nye Qing still referred to him as father-in-law. It could be seen how important Wei Yong was in his heart. Thus, even if Nye Yang was very wary of this person, he could not act against Wei Yong in the short term. Wei Yong's face was extremely pale and he looked somewhat dazed. He gathered his spirits and said to his son-in-law, "The journey is long. Young master has worked hard on the matter of supporting the spirit." Nye Yang asked a few questions out of concern, completely acting like a different Nye Qing. The system watched his performance and was secretly speechless. Nye Yang was really born in the wrong era, or else he would have swept the Oscars. Wei Yong said weakly, "It's nothing. Last night, I thought about my late master's past and couldn't control my emotions, so I couldn't sleep." The system reminded Nye Yang in a timely manner. This morning Nye Yang couldn't take it anymore and passed away. Wei Yong was heartbroken and cried the whole night. "Don't expose him, he looks so pitiful." The person lying in the coffin now is not Nye Yang's substitute, but Nye Yang himself. Nye Yang's shrouds were all changed by him. If that's the case, father and son will die on the same day. I wonder how Nye Yang, who left first, will feel when he sees his son catching up to him on the road to hell. Nye Yang sighed. "Looking at the current situation, don't you think you're too cold-hearted, system?" The system wanted to roll its eyes. It wasn't a human, it was the highest form of life that surpassed humans. Humans were just ants. No matter how tragic their deaths were, it would not be able to arouse its sympathy. Nye Yang was really stupid to use a human's mind to judge it. Wei Yong said, "The auspicious time is here, young master, go on your way." Nye Yang warned, Yang's personality? If there's anything wrong with him, please forgive him, father-in-law." Wei Yong could not even smile in response, and only said that he would take care of Nye Yang. "Raise the spirit." The white banner fluttered and the mournful cries shook the heavens. Nye Yang supported the spirit and went on his way. Only when the tens of thousands of people left his sight did Wei Yong's expression turn as cold as ice. His hands clenched into fists that made people's teeth ache. "Go back." Chapter 15:10. The sleeping powder could make Nye Qing sleep until the sun was up, but he woke up before the procession set off. To be precise, the person who woke up wasn't Nye Qing but a salted fish. "Where am I? Where am I? What am I doing?" That was what lucky Queen Xinyue was thinking. As an ancient big shot who had been in the live broadcast room for a long time, she had always been envious of those who had transmigrated, especially the super lucky queen who was lucky enough to get a wedding costume from the host. Today was another round of Dream of 1,000 Years. She looked at the ID in the streaming room and waited anxiously. She had won the bid. She had transmigrated after winning the bid, but then she realized something was wrong. Her chest was flat, and there was an unfamiliar sausage under the blanket. Can't you be more professional in Dream of 1,000 Years? Isn't it good for a girl to wear a girl's body? She had touched it out of curiosity, but the body was sensitive. The little brother had stood up immediately, which scared her. If it wasn't for the streaming, she would have liked to try the experience of a man masturbating. As she muttered to herself, a warm, confused, and frightened voice rang in her mind. "You. What kind of demon are you?" "Oh my." The salted fish Lucky Emperor was so scared that she jumped up. She could accept transmigration, but she couldn't accept such a supernatural event. It was too scary. Streamer, are you there?" "What? Why is someone talking in my body?" There had been so many dream of 1,000 years in the past, but no one had experienced such a thing. Was there a bug in her transmigration? Jiang Pingji was having breakfast. As usual, she had 15 to 16 steamed buns and 3 to 4 bowls of seaweed soup. "Streamer V, you look like a military tent. Figure out where you are first. Don't panic, I'll always be here." The Lucky Emperor was slightly relieved. At that moment the voice rang out again. It was panicky and confused. "Who are you? Why is it Yang's voice?" The salted fish asked timidly, "Who is Yang?" Jiang Pingji glanced at the streaming room. The temporarily borrowed body of the Lucky Emperor looked familiar. She frowned and quickly remembered who the person was. It was the host of the system fragment, a young man named Nie Yang. But now she realized that the system fragment wasn't with Nie Yang anymore. Could it be that he had left in an accident? Jiang Pingji secretly denied this speculation. Apart from the main body of the system, the energy stored in the separated subsystems was limited, and it was impossible for the system to easily give up on a host. The conversation between Lucky King and the mysterious male voice continued. The man said, "Yang is Nie Yang. Who are you?" Lucky King asked, "Then who are you?" As he spoke he found the copper mirror. The face reflected in the copper mirror was Nie Yang's. The man could see everything around him through Europe's eyes, but he couldn't control his body. When he saw the face reflected in the bronze mirror, he almost lost his composure. How did he get into Nie Yang's body? Who was the one who possessed Nie Yang's body? Where are the Real Yang in my body now? All kinds of problems troubled Nie Qing. Yes, this unlucky person who had his nest occupied was Nie Qing. Dream of 1,000 years had chosen his body as its host. It took Lucky a few minutes to understand the situation. If that's the case, I've joined Yang. He's my lord's enemy? Lucky Emperor was smart. He did not say host, but replaced it with lord, to prevent Nie Qing from asking all sorts of questions. Nie Qing's heart trembled. "What did you say? What enemy? Who is your lord?" "The famous Lu Shi, my little brother. Are you afraid now? I have a strong backer, so you better behave yourself." Nie Qing suddenly lost control. He suspected that Jiang Pingji had used witchcraft to cause the current situation. Lucky King ignored him and curiously studied the system interface. According to Lucky King's guide on the forum, the system would give him a reminder to help him hide his identity. Lucky King didn't understand the situation, so he naturally sought help from the system. He was shocked when he saw it. "Please leave this place immediately, a fatal disaster is about to befall you." "Oh my, this is so exciting." She had only transmigrated for a few minutes, but a red alert had sounded. "I'm not transmigrating, this is PUBG." In Nie Qing's ears it was harmonized into, "I'm not beeping, it's beeping, 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 beeping." Because he couldn't control his body, Nie Qing could only watch as the wandering ghost controlled his body to put on his clothes and leave the tent. Nie Qing couldn't help but ask, "Where are you going?" Lucky King said impatiently, "Escape, don't bother me." The system was considerate enough to give him an escape route. The Lucky Emperor tried to calm his racing heart as he moved quickly. She didn't know if it was a psychological effect, but she felt a sense of danger following her like a shadow. According to the system, she came to a logistics tent, endured the stench and picked out a military uniform to change into. Anyway, this body was a man's, so she changed into it and smeared her face with yellow mud. Relying on the guide given by the system, Lucky King blended into the patrol team without any mishaps. Nie Qing asked in surprise, "How do you even know the password to change every 3 days?" There were many people in the camp, and in order to prevent spies from sneaking in, the password was often changed everywhere. Nie Qing thought there was a spy in the camp, and was anxious about how to pass the news to Wei Dan and the others. He was caught off guard and heard a shocking discussion. The soldiers who stopped to rest actually said that Nie Qing was ready to set off. How was that possible? If he was here, then who was the Nie Qing the soldiers were talking about? Not long after, there was a commotion in the camp as if someone was being tracked. Nie Qing once again heard an explosive news that turned his worldview upside down. Nie Yang secretly planned and sent people to assassinate the elders of the Nie family and its affiliated forces. with the intention of attacking young Master Nye Qing and seizing the Nye family. How was this possible? Wei Dan sent off the funeral procession and turned to kill Nye Yang, but he didn't expect Nye Yang to not be in the tent. Where is he? Where did the guards go? Wei Dan was furious. How many spies had he sent to keep an eye on Nye Yang? Why were they all transferred away? After a while, Wei Dan found out that the person who was transferred away was his good son-in-law Nye Qing. More accurately, it should be Nye Yang who replaced Nye Qing. The system asked Nye Yang why he did this. Nye Yang said, "You don't understand the human heart." If Wei Dan directly went to settle the score, he would most likely choose to torture him. That way Nye Qing would have time to defend himself. But if Wei Dan returned and found that Nye Qing was not in the tent, he would most likely suspect that Nye Qing fled in fear of punishment. In his anger he would most likely kill him and Nye Qing would not have a chance to defend himself. The system was silent for a while. As expected, the human heart was hard to predict when it became vicious. Chapter 15:11. Hey, are you okay? Lucky Emperor realized that the voice in her head had gone silent. She could not help but ask with concern. Nye Qing did not answer. Lucky Emperor continued, "Humans will meet a few scumbags in their lives. Fortunately, there's still room for redemption. The most important thing for you now is to find a way to restore your identity. Now that you're wearing Nye Yang's face, you'll be killed the moment you show up." The Nye family's military camp was heavily guarded. Even with the help of the system notification, as long as she did not find a way to leave the camp, she would die. She said, "I can only stay here for 12 hours. What do you plan to do after 12 hours? According to the various information and the system notification, Lucky Emperor found out that she was temporarily borrowing Nye Qing's body. However, because of the appearance alteration pill buff, this body looked like Nye Yang and was about to face the danger of being hunted down. Let me ask you a few questions. Do you trust your father-in-law Wei Dan or your good brother Nye Yang? After a while, Nye Qing's trembling and suppressed voice sounded in her head. Of course it's my father-in-law. Lucky Emperor said, then it's settled. Your father-in-law said that Nye Yang secretly plotted against the Nye family and killed the Nye family's elders. It's very likely that he was the one who poisoned your father. You inexplicably ate the appearance alteration pill and became Nye Yang. Have you ever thought that the real Nye Yang also ate the appearance alteration pill and became you? If that's not the case, how do you explain the people who are supporting you? If he's really your good brother, why didn't he call for you when he suddenly changed his face and identity? If I didn't appear, your father-in-law would have cut you into pieces." Nye Qing was silent for a long time. However, Lucky Emperor could feel his emotions. Under the influence of that strong emotion, even she could not help but feel hatred and pain. I say, think of a way. Even with the system's help, she could not leave the Nye camp. What? That old fellow Wei Dan had locked down the camp and said that not even a fly could be let out. Her idea of joining the streamer had gone down the drain. Now she could only hope that the native Nye Qing had a good idea. Nye Qing said, "Do me a favor? Do you know how to write?" Lucky King said, "Brother, are you looking down on the cultural level of a straight-A student who received 9 years of compulsory education, a key high school student, and a 211 university student?" Nye Qing didn't understand what she was saying, but she felt kindness. "Help me write some words. I can't control my body." After all, they were two little grasshoppers tied to the same rope. She didn't want to be the first person in the history of Dream of 1,000 Years to die prematurely. That would be too embarrassing. Not only did he not bring back any local specialties, he was also chopped into pieces by the father-in-law of this body. He could not afford to lose face. Nye Qing calmed down and said, "Yang. Although Nye Yang understands me, it's impossible for him to know everything. I still have a way to prove my identity. But I need your help. Help me. Help me hide for a while so that father-in-law can calm down." He knew very well how loyal his father-in-law was to his father. If they found out that the culprit behind all of this had escaped, they would have to kill him. Nye Qing would not even have a chance to defend himself. Although he didn't know where Nye Yang got the appearance-changing pill, it must have been an external skill. Nye Qing wasn't afraid of anything else. He was afraid that if he died, the appearance-changing pill would lose its effect and he would return to his original appearance. If his father-in-law found out the truth, he would commit suicide as an apology. No matter what, he had to find a way to get back his identity. Lucky King said righteously, "Tell me, I'll write." After a while, both of them fell silent. "Have you really studied before?" Nye Qing asked uncertainly. Lucky King almost exploded. Are you questioning this straight-A student's educational background? Although it was simplified Chinese, Nie Qing could barely make out the meaning. Nie Qing didn't ask for more. Nie Qing asked Lucky King to write an article that his father-in-law, Wei Dan, had written a long time ago. This article was about Wei Dan's first encounter with Nie Yang. Because it was somewhat personal, only 2 or 3 people had seen it so far, and Nie Qing was one of them. Because it was a camp-wide search, they couldn't let go of any suspicious places. Thus, Lucky King's words were discovered. What's so special about this scribble that's missing an arm and a leg? As one of the insiders, Fan Chen naturally joined in to share the pressure. This was to prevent Wei Dan from being provoked and leaving with the late master. Wei Dan spent a long time trying to identify these ugly scribbles that were missing an arm and a leg as words. Fan Chen could only recognize 1 or 2 words. What's written here? Wei Dan's face darkened and he frowned. It should be the first line of a poem. Is there anything else? Fan Chen said, there are a few more. Do you want to go take a look? Your body. Wei Dan said, is a little puzzled. They went to a few more places. The more Wei Dan read, the darker his expression became. The poem you're talking about is... Wei Dan recited a complete paragraph and said with a complicated expression, this is a miscellaneous poem that I wrote in my spare time. Why would it appear here? Fan Chen was also dumbfounded. You wrote it? Wei Dan nodded. I wrote it a few years ago. The content was a little rough, so it was buried in the study to collect dust. Fan Chen clicked his tongue in wonder and asked, Zishun, think about who has seen it. Who do you think left behind these words? Since it was written by Wei Dan himself, and it was a work that had collected dust in his early years, there were definitely not many people who had seen it. Wei Dan said, there are only 3 people, the late lord, the madam, and the young lord. One had already passed away, one was far away in his hometown, and the last was at the funeral. It can't be these 3. Think again, could we have missed someone? Wei Dan shook his head. There shouldn't be anyone else who has seen it. What is the purpose of the person who left behind these words? As they spoke, a soldier reported that they had found another place. This time, the words were not poems written by Wei Dan, but by Nie Qing when he was young. However, Wei Dan reprimanded Nie Qing for being too crafty and moaning without reason, and had him rewrite it. In other words, this was a useless manuscript. The only people who knew about it were Wei Dan and Nie Qing. In another place, the European emperor wanted to cry but had no tears to find that the enemy search circle had shrunk even further. Even with the help of the system, it was difficult to get away. Big brother, are you sure those words are useful? Nie Qing said sadly, I'll give it a try. If I'm forced into a dead end, I can't die in the hands of my father-in-law. The European emperor sighed. Poor child, learn from my master in your next life. Be more careful. I can only help you this much. After a while, the European emperor heard the sound of footsteps approaching. Not long after, several spears were pointed at her head. I think it's a game. It's over. The European emperor slowly stood up from the stable where he was hiding, his hands raised high on both sides of his head. In the distance, 2 middle-aged men dressed in scholarly robes stood. They were Wei Dan and Fan Chen. Fan Chen said, you're quite good at escaping. Did you think about the consequences when you were doing evil? The European emperor could not help but struggle. He grabbed the manger with both hands and shouted at Wei Dan. Father-in-law. I'm your son-in-law, I guarantee it. I also know that there's a painting on the 3rd row of your bookshelf. Wei Dan scolded, shut up. Fan Chen. Chapter 15:12. Nie Qing asked curiously, how do you know what's under the 3rd row of my bookshelf? The European emperor said, I'm just spouting nonsense but I feel like I hit the mark. Nie Qing was speechless. Wei Yong took a few steps forward and placed his right hand on the hilt of his sword. He pulled out his sword. Both the European emperor and Nie Qing thought to themselves, my life is over. Father-in-law, please wait. The European emperor raised his hand to stop him from approaching. His expression was full of anxiety. She carefully swallowed her saliva and said, Father-in-law, please don't do it. I'll cut my own throat. Please don't tire you out. Nie Qing had said that even if she had to die, she couldn't die in the hands of Wei Yong. The European emperor felt that it made sense. Fan Chen looked at Wei Yong suspiciously and asked, when did Nie Yang become Zishuan's son-in-law? Wei Yong also said, I'm also curious. How did he get to call you father-in-law? Wei Yong originally suspected that the person who left these strange words had something to do with Nie Qing, but after seeing the person in person, he felt like he was possessed. Fan Chen asked again, What's under the third row of your bookshelf? Wei Yong glanced at him coldly. Fan Chen felt an inexplicable chill. You believe his nonsense? Fan Chen was speechless. It wasn't that he wanted to believe it, but Wei Yong's reaction forced him to believe it. He was so curious that his heart was itching. Wei Yong's gaze turned to the European emperor. His cold and murderous eyes made the European emperor and Ye Qing tremble. Bring her back for interrogation. Fan Chen asked him, why don't we just kill her to prevent future trouble? Wei Yong replied without turning his head, we can't kill her for now. The European emperor was tied up. Because the rope was very tight, she kept screaming in pain. Fan Chen lost his patience. They escorted her to the tent. The European emperor was violently pushed and fell to the ground. She was in so much pain that tears welled up in her eyes. She felt very wronged. Who are you? Wei Yong dismissed his attendants. Only he, the European emperor, and Fan Chen were left. I've already called you father-in-law. Who do you think I am? Your son-in-law. She was about to complain when Jiang Pingji sent her a message. She paused and continued, no, to be precise, this body belongs to your son-in-law. Can't you guys have some basic respect for mountain ghosts? I saved your son-in-law and the eldest son of your old master. Is this how you treat your savior? Wei Yong sneered. He was most annoyed by the talk of gods and ghosts. Lucky Emperor said calmly, I used to be a mountain ghost that cultivated in the mountains. Yesterday I came out to play and found the demonic aura in the camp. Out of curiosity I came to take a look. I didn't expect to witness such a good show. That man named Nye Yang gave your son-in-law an appearance-changing pill and used it to swap their appearances. Now, Nye Yang has openly taken the position of your son-in-law, and your son-in-law has taken the blame for him. Do you have proof? Lucky Emperor said stubbornly, I don't have any evidence, but you can kill me. I only hope that you can remain calm when you see your son-in-law die under your sword. I'm a spirit of the mountains, shapeless and formless. If this body dies, at most my soul will leave, but your son-in-law won't be so lucky. After listening for a while, Fan Chen was confused at first, then shocked. You're really a spirit? Lucky Emperor said according to Jiang Pingji's remote guidance, you're really forgetful. Wasn't the demon Empress before Zhongzhao was destroyed a wooden figure? Even an ambitious spirit can run to become an empress. Why can't a well-behaved mountain ghost come out and do good deeds? The news that the demon Empress was a wooden puppet spread like wildfire among the people. Many people thought that it was just a rumor, but Wei Yong, Fan Chen, and the others had their own sources of information. The demon Empress had indeed turned from a living person to a wooden puppet in front of everyone. Lucky Emperor forced himself to calm down and continued to repeat Jiang Pingji's words. I'm really unlucky. It's so good to stay in the mountains and cultivate. It's rare for me to come out, but I encounter such a terrible thing. I'm even involved in the battle of the feudal lords. If I'm not careful, I'll be stained with endless karma. She looked like she had nothing to lose and said to Wei Yong fearlessly, the Nye Yang you mentioned seems to be in cahoots with the demons of the evil path. I don't know where he got the appearance-changing pill. There's no proof. As long as the person dies, the effect of the appearance-changing pill will disappear. Do you want to test it? Anyway, I'm not afraid of death. Your son-in-law only has one life. Wei Yong's hand that was holding the sword was trembling. His heart was wavering. Did you leave those words just now? I asked Nye Qing and he passed it on to me. Since you don't know whether to believe him or not, why not give him a chance to defend himself? Wei Yong asked again, can he hear me? Lucky Emperor heaved a sigh of relief. The streamer was worth two people. It seemed that Wei Yong had been fooled. He can hear you. If you want to ask me anything, I can help you pass on the message. If what you said is true, I'll treat you as my benefactor. If there's any falsehood, you know what will happen to you. Lucky Emperor saw that Jiang Pingji had sent him another bullet screen. He was excited. Great. It just so happens that we mountain ghosts don't like to be involved with mortals, especially people who are involved with the world's major powers. I saved Nye Qing's life. Remember to give me a gift. We're done. Wei Yong's face darkened. He asked a few questions. For example, where did he become Nye Qing's disciple, what they talked about, what jokes Nye Yang made when he brought his son to be his disciple, what promises Nye Qing made when he married Wei Yong's eldest daughter. These were all private matters. Very few people knew about them. Even if Nye Yang and Nye Qing were close friends, it was impossible for him to know about these small matters. To prevent accidents, Wei Yong purposely set up traps. For example, he asked Nye Qing what books were placed on the bookshelf in the southwest corner of his study. In reality, there were only a few zither and no bookshelves. Nie Qing answered one by one, and Lucky Emperor passed on the information. The more Wei Yong asked, the more frightened he became. Fan Qin, who was beside him, paled. Do you believe me now? Lucky Emperor stabbed Wei Yong in the heart. You almost killed your son-in-law. Wei Yong used the tip of his sword to remove the thick rope that bound him. Lucky Emperor finally regained his freedom. I can only possess a mortal for 12 hours. After 12 hours, Nie Qing will regain control of the body. Fan Qin asked, is there a way to remove the effects of the pill and let the young master regain his original appearance? Lucky Emperor shrugged. There's no way. I don't know either. If you can help the young master return, I will never forget your great kindness. How could Lucky Emperor know? When he was secretly anxious, Jiang Pingji pointed out the way for him. Since you're begging, there's a way. What way? You capture Nie Yang and give him to Lu Shi. Lu Shi's sword can slay all the demons in the world. That demon is currently possessing Nie Yang's body. Lucky Emperor said, as long as the demon helping Nie Yang is eliminated, the effects of the pill will naturally be removed. Of course, although I'm a mountain ghost, I've heard that mortals fight fiercely. Lu Shi is your mortal enemy. However, there are trade-offs in everything. Do you want Nie Yang to take over your nest and make Nie Qing unable to see the light for the rest of his life? Or do you want to endure the humiliation and let Lu Shi help you eliminate the demon? You choose. Wei Yong trembled and almost lost his footing. He said sarcastically, is Lu Shi really the chosen one? All the demons in the world will help him succeed? Lucky Emperor was about to reply, of course, when Jiang Pingji sent a bullet scream. It's hard to say. Whoever has the world in the end will be the chosen one. She laughed. I've already said that it's not easy for mountain ghosts to cultivate. They can't casually affect the change of emperors in the mortal world. How can a small mountain ghost bear such a huge karma? Believe it or not, it's up to you. Fan Qin said, that's true. If mountain ghosts help Lu Shi, why would they save the young master? Chapter 15:13. Oh Huang said this with a fake smile, but deep down she was very upset. She didn't understand. Wasn't it good for the myth streamer to damage the enemy's morale? Why did she reject it? Jiang Pingji's reason was simple. First, she had the strength to defeat the Nie family. There was no need to take this shortcut. Even if she won, it would not be honorable. Instead, she would be criticized as destiny. It sounded nice, but it was useless against those who were strong. How could she feel good if she said that she got her results by luck? Second, and this was also the most important reason, she wanted to take the opportunity to get rid of the system fragment. Other than the god-slaying sword in her hand, ordinary people could not deal with a spiritual life like the system. It was useless to kill Nie Yang. The system fragment would find a way to escape. If she missed this opportunity, it would be difficult to catch it in the future. To put it bluntly, this thing was a pile of sh*t. It would always jump out to annoy her when she didn't expect it. Killing it would solve the problem once and for all. Jiang Pingji did not explain to Oh Huang. Oh Huang could not ask in front of Wei Yong and the others. She could only bury her doubts in her heart. At that moment, Nie Qing's voice sounded. She asked a question that caught her off guard. Didn't you just say that Lu Shi is your lord? Why did you change your mind? Are you someone sent by Lu Shi or are you a mountain ghost? With Jiang Pingji's help, Wei Yong was coaxed, but Nie Qing was not so easy to fool. She still remembered that Oh Huang had told her that Jiang Pingji was her lord. Since she called her lord, it was obvious that she had a point. Nie Qing said sternly, don't lie to my father-in-law. Oh Huang was secretly sweating. He blamed himself for talking too much. It was not easy to smooth things over. Because Jiang Pingji could not hear the conversation between Nie Qing and Oh Huang, she could not help her. She could only rely on herself. Fortunately, she was quick-witted and thought of an excuse. Didn't I say that just to appease you? If my lord was really Lu Shi, would I help you? I should just cut my own throat and force your father-in-law to death. Then your family would fall into endless internal strife. Nie Qing was stumped by her words. She said a little awkwardly, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. I'm a magnanimous person. This little misunderstanding is nothing. Lucky Emperor heaved a sigh of relief and said nonchalantly, but you, brother, I feel that you have a big problem. You are so pure and kind while Lu Shi is full of ink from head to toe. You will be at a disadvantage. Nie Qing didn't understand what covered in ink from head to toe meant, but he could relate it to the fact that Lucky Emperor said he was pure and kind. For a moment he thought of Nie Yang and his mood sank again. Being kind was not a bad habit, but Nie Qing had to admit that his kindness was untimely. Not only would he get himself killed, but he would also implicate the people around him. This time he was lucky enough to run into the mountain ghost, and his father-in-law did not kill him. If he were to fall into the same trap again, would he still be so lucky? Nie Qing's talent was not bad, it was just that he usually liked to think in a positive direction. After this experience he should have truly matured. It's not a bad thing to be kind. If you were in a peaceful era, you would have made friends all over the world. But it's a chaotic world now. Your father is gone and no one can shelter you from the wind and rain. You can't continue being so pure. Lu Shi is too black-hearted. He's full of schemes. If you don't work hard, how can you protect your father's hard work? Nie Qing revealed a bitter smile. Thank you for your guidance, fairy. Lucky Emperor was stunned. He could not help but hug his head in frustration. She was on the streamer's side. Why would she comfort the leader of the opposing camp? Would the streamer expel her as a fan if she knew? Jiang Pingji did not know, and even if she did, she would not say anything. After all, the salted fishes were there to have fun and experience transmigration, not to be her subordinate and work for her. Jiang Pingji could not restrict the salted fish's preferences and choices. She would choose to respect them. Lucky Emperor comforted Nie Qing, which showed that he was a kind and simple salted fish. After settling Nie Qing, Lucky Emperor said, "Don't you need to send people to chase the Real Nie Yang?" Wei Ming said, "There's no rush. The spiritual support team is not fast. They can catch up in a day." Since that was the case, Lucky Emperor was not in a hurry. Just as she did not know what to say, Jiang Pingji reminded her to take advantage of Wei Ming. "I helped you and saved Nie Qing's life. The deal is done. Thank you for your patronage." Wei Ming maintained his poise. "Just tell me what you like, fairy. We will definitely give it to you." "Aha, I like forthright people like you. My anxiety today was not in vain. I was afraid that I would turn into a box the moment I landed. If not for her quick-wittedness, coupled with the system's notification and Nie Qing's assistance, she would definitely be dead. Now that the danger was averted, she would not be able to live up to her anxiety if she did not extort more good things." Lucky Emperor's first reaction was accessories. "Headwear. I want a set of headwear. I heard that Lu Shi sent a set of headwear for women. Is it still there? I want that." Wei Ming and Fan Chen's expressions were a little ugly. Even though Nie Liang had cleverly resolved the humiliation of sending a headwear for women, he was not happy to mention it. Lucky Emperor just had to rub salt into his wound. "I burned it as a sacrifice." Wei Ming's tone was slightly cold. "What a waste of God's gift," Lucky Emperor said. "Then, find a similar set." What a bunch of wastrels. Did they not know how expensive the set of gifts given by the host was? A tycoon offered 10 million but refused to sell it. Although it was a military camp, there were many spoils of war. If one looked carefully, one could find gold, silver, and jewelry. Wei Ming sent someone to search for a box for Lucky Emperor as a thank you gift. Naturally, Lucky Emperor wanted to accept all of them. However, the system reminded her that there was a weight and volume limit when she teleported back. If she exceeded the limit, she would be in trouble. Why is this happening? Lucky Emperor could not help but feel distressed. She wanted all of these treasures. They were the spoils of war that she had exchanged her life for. The system actually gave her an answer. The Dream of a Thousand Years event is not only to repay the audience's long-standing support, but also to correct history and ensure that the world does not collapse. If the experiencer takes too many items, it is very likely to cause a deviation in the historical timeline. Please understand. Lucky Emperor expressed her understanding towards this explanation. It was a pleasant surprise that she had gained something this time. She was not a greedy person, so she quickly calmed down. She endured the pain of picking and choosing. As far as the system allowed, she chose what she thought was the prettiest, the most favorite, and the most valuable. Nie Qing could not stand it anymore. He said, "These are the thank you gifts from father-in-law. Fairy, you can take all of them." "You don't understand. This is called an equivalent exchange. I can only receive what I give." Lucky Emperor's face was full of tears, but she still had to maintain the posture of an expert. She said earnestly, "Your life is only worth this little money. I can't take more or I will suffer retribution." Nie Qing was speechless. Chapter 15-14. O Huang rebuked Nie Qing, and his gloomy mood was finally lifted. However, the surrounding salted fishes were rather curious about how she was being picky and not accepting all of them. Why didn't she take everything Wei Dan gave her? It was a big box of jewelry and there were at least 100 of them. In the end, the salted fish O Huang sat on the ground and picked the lighter, expensive and good-looking ones to put aside. There were about 10 of them. Jiang Pingji frowned and realized that things were not so simple. Looking at Oh Huang's reaction, she probably wanted to take all of them, but she chose a portion. Obviously, there was a system restriction. Jiang Pingji asked her old chief, who was also online. Yuaba, Jiang Xiaojiu, have you ever sent a parcel before? Jiang Pingji said, what kind of person do you think I am? Who hasn't used Interstellar Express in this era? Yuaba, express delivery is also about the most important thing and the continuation of the wait. In layman's terms, dream of 1,000 years was the most important thing, including the transportation and the return ticket. More than that, there was an additional price to pay for the continuation of the wait, which ordinary people could not afford. Besides that, another important reason was the butterfly effect. If too many items were taken away, it would cause a serious deviation in history. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, you know the system's tricks very well, old chief. Yuaba, because I have one here. Although it has some problems with its brain, it is obedient. Jiang Pingji, although it was called a system, it was actually one of the spiritual beings. Her old chief actually had one? Jiang Pingji could not help but ask, previously you said that you got a new job after retiring. Is it convenient for you to tell me about the nature of the job? Yuaba, it's a job. To put it bluntly, I just work for others. The only advantage is that I can travel at public expense and get reimbursed in full. I can see many interesting people and things. Although the place I travel to is poor and backward, the pay is good, so I bear with it. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, what you said is true, but you didn't say anything. You don't have to be so guarded against me, do you? Was there any difference between what she said and what she didn't say? Yuaba, I have to be guarded against you. Everyone in the 7th Corps knew that Jiang Pingji was a thorn. They had to be careful when talking to her lest they be exposed. Jiang Pingji rubbed her chin. She had a feeling that her old chief was hiding something. However, Jiang Pingji couldn't force her to speak if she didn't want to. She wouldn't harm her anyway. From the new system to the appearance of the old chief, Jiang Pingji vaguely sensed something, but her guess had yet to be confirmed. Your Abba, due to the confidentiality agreement we signed in the past, there are some things that you won't be able to find out even if you want to because I can't tell you. The only thing that could be revealed was that the human alliance was relying on this piece of land to revitalize the overall situation. Jiang Pingji was dumbfounded. She then thought of the few subsystems that she had killed. The system was the former heavenly brain that had a grudge against the Federation. From the looks of it, the burden on his shoulders was quite heavy. However, it sounded a bit exaggerated to say that the entire human alliance was counting on her to save the situation. Your Abba, oh, this is not an exaggeration at all. You will know in the future. Jiang Pingji was kept in suspense and her heart was itching. It was fine if she didn't know that there was such a secret, but the old general told her that there was a secret but refused to tell her the content. This was too much. Old chief, do you know of a genre of online novels called fast travel? Jiang Pingji was about to probe further when the old chief's meat bun profile picture immediately darkened. Your friend, your Abba, has gone offline. Jiang Pingji was speechless. She seemed to know something. Old chief, you've fallen. She rubbed her forehead, feeling a headache coming on. The first half of her life was quite normal, but after her transmigration, all sorts of monsters and demons appeared. However, now is not the time to complain about this. The most important thing is to solve this system fragment. Although the system was not a good thing, its existence was simply a bug. It would be better to solve it as soon as possible. On the other side, Wei Yong and the others did not dare to take even half a step away from Oh Huang. You guys are staring at me like this. I feel like I'm a prisoner. Oh Huang could not help but complain to Nie Qing about the behavior of Wei Yong and the others. If she was given 2 sticks, she could simulate tears in prison. Nie Qing's mood had recovered a lot, and the fatigue in her smile was not as strong. Hearing Oh Huang's willful and unguarded words, she could not help but smile. Father-in-law and the others will not be able to dispel their suspicions with just a few words. You said that you only possessed this body for 12 hours, but they may not believe you completely. If we don't keep an eye on you, it is hard to guarantee that no accidents will occur. Please forgive me, Fairy. Oh Huang glanced at the system countdown and hugged the precious box tightly. The jewelry in the box was precious, and the box used to contain them was carved from a whole piece of red sandalwood. It was extremely expensive. Seeing that the countdown was about to end, Oh Huang hesitated for a while and left a message for Nie Qing. I can't understand people like you who see glory and responsibility as more important than the heavens. Compared to you, I am more like a layman. I only know that living is more important than anything else. Only when you are alive can you create hope and opportunities for the future. If you die you have nothing. Brother Nye Qing, take care. Nye Qing did not understand, but he smiled and thanked her. After a while he felt his entire body sink. What happened? Nye Qing had just opened his mouth when he heard Nye Yang's voice. He raised his hand and was shocked to find that he could control his body. Only then did he understand that the fairy had left. Nye Qing could not help but look at Wei Yong and Fan Chen. The two had different reactions, but their eyes were filled with worry, and they could not help but redden. Wei Yong called out tentatively, "Young master?" Nye Qing choked with sobs, "Father-in-law?" Fan Chen could not help but rub his eyes, saying in shock, "That really was a fairy." When O Huang left, the box she was hugging also disappeared. Wei Yong and Fan Chen saw this scene with their own eyes. Only now did they completely believe O Huang's words. Nye Qing took a deep breath and said, "The most important thing now is to quickly get Nye Yang back and swap identities." Now that Nye Qing was using Nye Yang's appearance, other than Wei Yong and Fan Chen, the other officials would not believe him. If Nye Yang made a false accusation at a critical moment, not only would Nye Qing's life be in danger, the two elders would also be implicated. In terms of ruthlessness, Nye Qing was far from being Nye Yang's match. Chapter 15:15. Wei Yong said, "Young master, don't be anxious. Young master should not appear in this matter." Nye Qing asked, "Why?" He wanted to personally ask Nye Yang why he treated him this way. How had Nye Qing wronged Nye Yang in the slightest? Were there many years of brotherly love all fake? Wei Yong said, "According to what that mountain ghost said, Nye Yang has the help of an evil demon. If you appear, how can the evil demon not guess our intentions? I'm afraid we'll alert the enemy. When this old subject captures Nye Yang, there's still time for young master to say or ask anything." Nye Qing said in shame, "This is this son-in-law's fault, I didn't think of this." Wei Yong said, "After experiencing this, young master should understand that a person's heart is hard to predict. Nye Yang, take this as a lesson." Nye Qing thought of something, his face pale as he said, "Father's poison, was really done by him?" Wei Yong said, "Before the late master died, he sent someone to find a bottle of poison in Nye Yang's study. This poison was the same as the late master's. However, this alone is not enough to convict Nye Yang. After that, the evidence of Nye Yang's scheme to murder young master can be considered irrefutable." Nye Qing's eyes were as red as a rabbit's, tears rolling down his face. "In that case, it was I who killed father," Wei Yong said. "Even the late master and this old subject were deceived by Nye Yang, much less the inexperienced young master at that time. This matter could not be blamed on Nye Qing, it could only be blamed on the vicious and merciless Nye Yang. Because they had to support the spirit, Nye Yang and the others did not walk quickly. The men sent by Wei Yong and Wei Yong caught up not long after the sky turned dark. Nye Yang pretended to be surprised. "What happened?" The messenger said in panic, "Reporting to Lord, something big happened in the camp." At noon, military advisor Wei and registrar Fan died one after the other. Even though Nye Yang had been mentally prepared, he was still shocked speechless by this news. However, the people who died were father-in-law and father's important officials. Nye Yang was now using Nye Qing's identity and could not remain indifferent. He cried saying, "Father-in-law and the others are more than that. Father is gone, they don't want to live anymore." Nye Yang's acting was obviously at the level of a best actor. He cried at the drop of a hat and acted with sincerity, like another Nye Qing. Wei Yong and Fan Chen sacrificed themselves for their masters was a major event. Nye Yang took the initiative to meet the messenger and did not bring many people with him. The messenger was Wei Yong's trusted subordinate. In order not to arouse Nye Yang's and Yao Xie's suspicions, the messenger did not know that Wei Yong and the others were fine. He even thought that the two of them had really committed suicide for their master. Before sacrificing himself for his master, Wei Yong had left a secret suicide note for Nye Qing. Since it was a confidential matter, he naturally had to dismiss his subordinates and hand it over to them alone. Although Nye Yang was shrewd, Wei Dan was also a wily old fox. In the end, Nye Yang was still one step behind. "You did?" Nye Yang opened the letter. Just as he was about to read it, Wei Yong's confidant suddenly rushed forward, covered his mouth and subdued him. At this time, a body double that looked very similar to Nye Qing changed into morning clothes and a bamboo hat, switching identities with Nye Yang. "Tie him up and gag him." Just as Nye Yang was about to struggle, several people pounced on him and tied him up. They put a bag as tall as a person and carried him away. The body double continued to carry Nie Yang's spirit to Bianzhou. Nie Yang struggled for a while, but realized that it was all in vain, so he simply gave up. System. What's going on? The system was silent for a long time before it spoke. There are two possibilities. Either Nie Qing is dead, and Wei Yong did not sacrifice himself for his master, and instead endured the pain to avenge his son-in-law. Or Nie Qing and Wei Yong are not dead, and your plan has already been exposed by them, and they are now going to capture you and interrogate you. Nie Yang's mouth was stuffed with a piece of cloth, and his entire body was curled up in the sack. You're saying Nie Qing and Wei Yong have already seen through our plan? The system said. Yes, it looks like. I've underestimated these ordinary people. Nie Yang's breathing quickened. The sack was stuffy and hot. He had been placed on the back of a horse, and his internal organs were about to shift. Aren't you very powerful? Is there no way to fix this? The system was also very angry. This was originally a trap to kill Nie Qing, but it did not expect its host to lose his life. Although Nie Yang was somewhat annoying and had secretly tried to resist it, the system was still satisfied with Nie Yang. There's nothing I can do now. So what if Nie Yang could escape this time? He would lose his noble identity and status, and he would have to conceal his identity and hide in the future. The already weak emperor's energy in Nie Yang's body would dissipate completely. To the system he was useless. The only use he had was for it to continue to absorb the last bit of emperor's energy. In fact, as one of the candidates to possess emperor's energy, Nie Yang's emperor's energy was no weaker than Jiang Pingji's at the beginning. If not for Nie Yang's rise and the system's interference, Nie Yang would have become the ruler of the Nie family, and the emperor's energy would have become stronger and stronger along with his status. Who knew that Nie Yang, who should have been content with his lot, would rise and take away Nie Yang's emperor's energy. The other part of the emperor's energy was stolen by the dormant system bit by bit. Nie Yang's luck was getting worse and worse, and now he was in a dead end. Nie Yang chuckled. Are you going to give up on me? The system said, It's not that I want to give up on you, it's that you're too disappointing. Nie Yang said sarcastically, Then why aren't you leaving? The system said, We've known each other for a while. No matter what, I have to send you on your last journey. In fact, the system was unwilling to leave only because it was greedy. After all, Nie Yang still had some emperor's energy on him. It couldn't waste it. When Wei Yong and the other two saw the battered and exhausted Nie Yang, they felt very conflicted. Nie Qing squatted down and removed the cloth from his mouth. He asked coldly, Why did you do this? Nie Yang didn't struggle and he couldn't be bothered to quibble on his behalf. He simply told the truth. Because of power. When you poisoned my father, at that time, was he in your way? How could you be so heartless? Nie Qing's chest burned with rage. He grabbed Nie Yang's collar with both hands and lifted him up. His gaze was ferocious. Nie Yang didn't look him in the eye. He turned his head and said, It's only a matter of time. He who strikes first gains the upper hand. Nie Qing was so angry that his vision turned black and his molars chattered. He almost couldn't resist the urge to strangle Nie Yang. The so-called brotherly respect, is also for the sake of this scheme? You treat me very well. I'm very grateful. Nie Yang's eyes darkened. He said in a low voice, However, you only gave me 1% of what you have. What I want is 1,000% more than what you have. I didn't want to harm you. But, who asked you to block my way? Nie Qing asked yourself. Is your personality really suitable to be a duke? Pure, weak, naive, the Nie family will only walk towards destruction in your hands. As a descendant of the Nie family, if you can sit in this position, why can't I? Everything Nie Yang had was given to him by the Nie family. He didn't fight for it himself. Nie Yang didn't feel guilty taking it for himself. Chapter 15-16. You want power, why didn't you say so? Why didn't you say so? Nie Qing lost his usual elegance and calmness, his eyes bloodshot as he choked. If you had just a little bit of trust in me, just a little bit of honesty, I would have done my best to help you. What you want and what I have, I will do my best to give it to you. Nie Yang. When have I ever owed you anything? But why did you take my father away from me? Nie Qing was on the verge of breaking down. Everyone was moved, even the cold-hearted Nie Yang didn't know how to retort. Because he knew that what Nie Qing had just said was true. What you want? Why didn't you say so? Why did you have to kill my father? Why? Nie Yang's expression darkened, his bloodied lips quivering as if he wanted to say something, but in the end he didn't. Facing Nie Qing's questioning, even if Nie Yang was so heartless, He felt a heavy stone in his chest, making it hard for him to breathe. The system sneered, "Are you touched? You actually believed his words? If Nie Yang didn't die, how could Nie Qing have power? Nie Qing's words were just to lie to you. If Nie Yang didn't die, he wouldn't have just sat back and watched his precious son assist you. Why was it so hard to let go of power once you picked it up? It wasn't just because power was attractive, it was also because power could protect oneself. For example, if Nie Qing convinced his father, Nie Yang, to gradually give power to Nie Yang, then wouldn't Nie Qing be worried that Nie Yang would harm him after he gained power? According to Nie Yang's temper, it was rare for him to get rid of the donkey after it had outlived its usefulness. Losing power was equivalent to taking off all the armor, exposing the defenseless soft meat in front of the enemy. Nie Yang laughed bitterly. Whether it was fake or sincere, at least he could say that. No matter what, he's sincere now. Nie Qing treated him sincerely, but this little bit of kindness couldn't stop Nie Yang from pursuing power. "Just kill me, there's nothing else to say." Nie Yang said hoarsely, "I poisoned Nie Yang, I admit it." Nie Qing thought Nie Yang would quibble for him. He didn't expect him to admit it so directly. He pointed at Nie Yang's heart and enunciated each word clearly. "Is power really that attractive in your eyes?" Nie Yang said indifferently, "Isn't the purpose of a person's life to live a better life?" Nie Qing had to admit that Nie Yang's words were correct, but he could not accept the methods Nie Yang used to pursue power. He relied on viciousness to get to this point, annihilating his conscience as a human. Even if he were to rule over the world, he was just a tyrant that others would turn pale at the mention of. Nie Yang. Nie Qing's breathing was heavy. Her tears had long since stopped, but the redness in her eyes was even more frightening than before. She grabbed Nie Yang's collar and pulled him closer to her. Her clear eyes were filled with viciousness as she gritted her teeth and said, "I sever all ties with you, and we will not meet again on the road to the Yellow Springs." Nie Yang forced a smile and said, "Of course we won't meet. If I travel faster, I might be able to see Duke Guangshan." When Wei Yong and Fan Xin heard this, their expressions changed drastically. In a rage, Nie Qing kicked the tied-up Nie Yang to the ground. Nie Yang rubbed the side of his face on the ground, his cheeks bleeding from the grit. He smiled and bent his waist, his knees curling on the ground as he used the force to sit up. He looked at Nie Qing out of the corner of his eye and said with some pity, "Does elder brother know that Duke Guangshan passed away yesterday at the Cho hour?" Even though Wei Yong and Fan Xin had ordered Nie Yang to shut up, he still finished speaking without fear of death. "Yesterday, the Cho hour?" Nie Qing was somewhat confused as he turned to look at Wei Yong and Fan Xin. Father had passed 7 days ago, how could he have passed away yesterday at the Cho hour? Seeing this, Wei Yong knew he could not hide it and said directly, "Former lord did pass away last night at the Cho hour. Previously, when he was about to enter the coffin, he choked and woke up. Former lord ordered us to hide it and secretly make arrangements, which is why he did not tell everyone." Nie Qing said, "Father, hid it even from me?" Wei Dan glanced at Nie Yang with some difficulty. Nie Qing immediately felt sorrow in his heart. His already wounded heart received another blow. Fan Xin said, "Former lord did this not because he did not trust lord. In reality, former lord planned to spread the news of lord's death to see if those ambitious fellows could sit still. Once these people are dealt with, lord's future path will be smooth. Former lord put a lot of thought into this." Nie Qing could not listen to anything. Looking at the situation, Wei Yong and Fan Xin must have worked together to hide his father in the last few days of his life, lying alone on his sickbed, waiting for death to come. Illness not only tortured the body but also the mind. As a son, he felt suffocated at the thought. Father had no children to serve him before he passed away. Who knew how he felt? After a series of blows, he was no longer in the mood to care about Nie Yang. "Father-in-law Fan Xin. Nie Yang will be handed over to you." Nie Qing threw the sword at his waist to one side, saying weakly, "Follow the plan, do what needs to be done. Take him away from here. I don't want to see him again. I want to be alone." Nie Yang's eyes widened when he heard this. He asked, "Why not kill me yourself?" Nie Qing said without turning his head, "I don't want to dirty my hands." Wei Yong saw Nie Qing leave and sighed, "If this matter can teach young lord to be ruthless, it's not too bad." He had someone put a large sack over Nie Yang's head and secretly sent him out of the camp. Nie Yang lay on the carriage in deep thought. The system asked him in surprise, "Is Nie Qing crazy? Does he want to let you go? Will you let the person who killed your father go?" Nie Yang asked sarcastically. He seemed to have guessed something. He closed his eyes to conserve his energy. Memories of the past quickly appeared in his mind. Happy, sad, angry, all sorts of things that made up his life. I'm wearing Nye Qing's face now. Other than Wei Yong and a few others, no one will know that I'm an imposter. If I cause a ruckus in the camp and accidentally attract the attention of Nye Yang's old officials, Nye Qing won't be able to explain himself. Naturally, he has to be executed secretly. The system was still the system. Even though it was very capable, it was too arrogant. It did not bother to figure out the thoughts of ants. This explanation was reasonable, so it did not continue asking. Nye Yang snorted coldly and his lips curled into a sly smile. It was precisely because the system did not bother to figure out the thoughts of ants that it was destined to fail. What kind of personality did Nye Qing have? He would rather something happen to him than let the Nye family fall into chaos. If he did not have a way to return to his position, Nye Qing would not dare to touch him. Even if he killed his father, he would grit his teeth and endure it for now. After all, Nye Qing was too important to Nyang. Nye Qing was ruthless enough to kill him. It was obvious that he had a way to restore his original appearance. Either he found an expert or Nye Qing knew some secret, such as Nye Yang being possessed by a demon. Killing Nye Yang was easy, but getting rid of this demon was very difficult. When Nye Yang guessed this, the image of Jiang Pingji's posture on the battlefield suddenly appeared in his mind. If he was right, Nye Qing planned to get rid of him and the system together. Chapter 15-17. Since they were bound to each other, why not go to hell together? After a long time, Nye Yang heard the voices of another group of people. You brought them? Yes. Do you want to inspect them? Yes. After the conversation, Nye Yang's sack was untied. Before he could adapt to the sudden sunlight, the person came forward and put something around his neck. He looked down and saw that it was a seal used by Taoists to summon gods. The seal was made of jade and had a unique and exquisite design. It was 7 inches long and 2.5 inches long. It was as white as snow. Even if he couldn't touch it with his hands, he could feel the cold air around it. What kind of process was this? Nye Yang frowned and turned to look at the other group of people. His pupils shrank when he saw what they were wearing. Weren't they soldiers under the enemy's command? Is the inspection done? The person pinched Nye Yang's face and smiled. Good quality goods. Tell your master that it's done before sunset. Humph, please don't play tricks. The person smiled. My master won't be able to eat or sleep in peace with such a monster alive. We are on the same page on this. Nye Yang had already guessed it, so he could more or less guess it, but the system was not so calm. Its voice was almost hoarse. Why is it the Sunfire Seal? The Sunfire Seal? Nye Yang was curious when he heard the unfamiliar term. You mean, the thing hanging around my neck? He could hear the fear in the system, which made him feel better. He searched through everything he knew but couldn't find anything related to the Sunfire Seal. If there's a Sunfire Seal, is there a Shuayin Seal? The system sneered and didn't answer. Nye Yang asked it. Is there something you're afraid of in this world? The system sneered. If I was at my peak, I wouldn't be afraid of this thing. It was almost destroyed, but who knew that dog money would repair it? In order to capture me, they are really generous. They are even willing to take out the 10 great ancient artifacts. The Sunfire Seal and the Shuayin Seal were a pair of artifacts. They could shock the Yin and Yang realms with terrifying power. Although their master had passed away many years ago, they were more than enough to suppress the system. In the silence, Nye Yang was brought to Jiang Pingji. It really is you. The system had once said on the battlefield that the sword in Jiang Pingji's hand was terrifying. Nye Yang was not surprised to see her today. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, You don't seem surprised at all. You have a good mentality. It's a pity that you met the wrong person. Nye Yang was puzzled. You met a bad person? Jiang Pingji said, The thing in your body calls itself the system, right? Do you know how evil that thing is? What it gives you is far less precious than what it steals from you. If it hadn't interfered, your future would be much better than it is now. As soon as she thought of this, she retracted her mind and said, I heard that some knives have a spirit. Is it possible that this thing is one too? Jiang Pingji couldn't suppress her curiosity and asked the old chief. He waited for a long time before replying. You Abba, the god-slaying knife you mentioned is the key to the Federation surviving this crisis. The thing inside is not a spirit. Jiang Pingji asked, Old chief, can you be more specific? You Abba, I signed a confidentiality agreement. Jiang Pingji said, You're not in the Federation. The confidentiality agreement is nothing. You Abba, the Federation was doomed to have such a reserve marshal. She took the lead in ignoring the confidentiality agreement. She was annoyed by Jiang Pingji's questions. She gave a simple reply and went offline. Jiang Pingji rested her chin on her hand and snorted. Can a guilty conscience be solved by going offline? Looking at the god-slaying knife, Jiang Pingji murmured, "It's true that the god-slaying knife can restrain the system, but it devours the system like it's food every time. It's weird no matter how I look at it. It makes me feel like an old mother who hunts down the system just to find food for her child." The god-slaying saber laid across her lap quietly and without any reaction. Chapter 15:18. My lord, what should we do with Nie Yang's corpse? Wuxia saw Jiang Pingji walk out of the tent and hurriedly went forward to ask. Jiang Pingji said, Nie Yang's last words were that he hoped I could cremate his corpse. Cremate? Wuxia was shocked. Although his lord liked to use fire to dispose of enemy and ally corpses on the battlefield, that was because the rotting of corpses could easily cause a large-scale plague. It was a last resort. Based on the current trend, corpses were not to be desecrated, not to mention cremation. Wasn't this what people thought of as burning the bones and scattering the ashes? He never expected that Nie Yang would be the one to suggest cremation. Why did he leave such a last word? Wuxia could not figure it out. According to his understanding of Nie Yang in his previous life, he was not a kind person despite his young age. He said that he had a clear conscience but he still owed someone. He made the decision to burn himself to death. Most likely, it had something to do with the person he owed. Perhaps he wanted to atone for his sins, Jiang Pingji said. I will fulfill his wish and return his ashes to Nie Yang. Yes. The moment Nie Yang died and the system was destroyed, not only did Nie Yang's corpse return to its original appearance, but Nie Qing, who was far away in the Nie camp, also felt an unfamiliar throbbing in his chest. A strange feeling came from all over his body, as if there were some worms wriggling on his body. Father-in-law, Nie Qing could not help but call out. Wei Yong and Fan Qin, who were patiently waiting outside, heard the commotion and rushed in. Young lord. My lord. As the two called out to him, they saw a scene that they would never forget for the rest of their lives. They saw with their own eyes that Nie Qing's body had grown a little, his shoulders had widened, and his face had undergone a drastic change. Does the young lord feel unwell anywhere? Wei Yong saw that Nie Qing had returned to his original appearance and heaved a sigh of relief. He hurriedly went forward to grab his arms and carefully examined him from head to toe. His eyes were overflowing with tears of excitement. When he realized that his actions were disrespectful, he hurriedly retracted his arms. Nie Qing said gently, "There's no discomfort. Father-in-law, don't worry." Fan Qin went forward and smiled. In that case, the demon and Nie Yang have been executed? We don't have to worry anymore. Nie Qing had been about to smile, but hearing Nie Yang's words, the corners of his lips that had just risen stiffened and he silently retracted them. Seeing his reaction, Wei Yong was a bit worried, but he didn't say anything else. Young master, this matter shouldn't be publicized. Nie Yang had slaughtered his own clan for his own selfish desires and plotted to murder the young master. Now that he had been executed, the case could be considered closed and the Nie clan could be given an explanation. Right now, the most important thing is to help the deceased master return home. Young master, rest a little tonight and set off tomorrow. With a few words, Wei Yong pushed the blame for Nie Yang's massacre of the Nie clan elders onto Nie Yang. In any case, Nie Yang was already a dead man. No matter how many scapegoats were thrown at him, would he be able to crawl out of the ground and protest? Nie Qing was distracted and listened to Wei Yong's arrangements. Not long after sunset, Jiang Pingji sent someone to place Nie Yang's ashes in a ceramic box and send it to the Nie camp. Nie Yang's last words were delivered along the way. Nie Qing didn't speak for a long time after hearing it. He stared at the urn of ashes in a daze, his thoughts unknown. Wei Yong asked him how he planned to deal with the urn of ashes. What Nie Yang had done was destined not to be buried in the ancestral grave. If Wei Yong were to decide, he wanted to scatter the ashes cleanly and let Nie Yang be a lonely ghost for the rest of his life. Nie Qing said, "Father-in-law, I want to bring him back to Bianzhou and find a place to bury him." He was already dead. Nie Qing didn't want to pursue the matter any further? Even if he scattered Nie Yang's ashes cleanly, what use was there besides venting his anger? Rather than torturing the souls of the dead, it was more like lashing the hearts of the living. Wei Yong said, "Everything shall be as the young master says." Nie Qing asked again, "As for Lu Shi, did father have any other instructions before he died?" The two armies were facing off against each other. They had only temporarily stopped fighting because of Niel Yang's funeral, but the battle that had to be fought still had to be fought unless one side retreated. Jiang Pingji currently had the upper hand. The Nie clan had suffered significant losses, but it hadn't reached the point where they had to retreat. Wei Yong said, "The late lord did make arrangements before he died, but because of Nie Yang's matter, it was temporarily put on hold." Nie Qing heaved a sigh of relief and said, "That's good. I'll have to trouble father-in-law with the matters at the front lines." Nie Qing could not be delayed in bringing the spirit back to his hometown. Nie Qing set off the next day. After secretly sending Nie Qing away, Wei Yong's expression darkened. He looked at Zhangjiang Pass with anger in his eyes. Even though Nie Yang had poisoned Nie Liang, it was Jiang Pingji who had angered Nie Liang over and over again and caused his early death. This debt had to be paid. Jiang Pingji looked at the letter of challenge in her hands and laughed involuntarily. She smiled helplessly and said, "I just helped them and they're going to deal with me." The salted fish expressed their disdain. After all, they were the clearest about what Jiang Pingji had done. Tudu Feiqiu, Wei Yong said that he wanted to deal with the streamer. Nie Liang's head is already over. If he didn't say anything, he would be slapping himself in the face. Gatorade, streamer, this is called the villain complaining first. It's obvious that you angered Nie Liang to death first. It's not wrong for them to deal with you. Jiang Pingji shook her head. She raised her hand and slammed the letter of challenge on the table. She shouted loudly outside the tent, "Quickly get the military counselors here." Before the soldiers could lift their feet, they saw Qiguan Rang walking toward the commander's tent with a solemn expression. "Wen Zheng, you came just in time. I have something to talk to you about." Qiguan Rang said, "My lord, there's no hurry. I have an urgent report from Zhangzhou." Jiang Pingji reached out and took the letter from Qiguan Rang. She said, "Forget it. Nie Liang is dead. The Nie family is without a leader. Nie Qing is still a young and inexperienced child. He's not a big threat. What's happening in Zhangzhou? Why is Wen Zheng so anxious?" It was said to be an urgent report, but it was actually old news from a few days ago. Jiang Pingji opened the letter and read 10 lines at a glance. The more she read, the tighter her brows knitted. Flames rose in her heart. This group of gentry clans in Zhangzhou. Are all of them itching for a beating? Jiang Pingji did not expect that the first problem they encountered would not come from Yang Tao's forces, but from the gentry clans in Zhangzhou. In order to further understand the water situation in Zhangzhou, Yang Si and the others advanced step by eliminating the water bandits. Later, they were obstructed by the navy under Yang Tao's command. Several small-scale water battles broke out between the two parties. They fought inextricably with their strong combat power. Looking at the battle situation, the gentry clans in Zhangzhou could not sit still. When they heard the news of Nie Liang's death, the scales began to tilt in Jiang Pingji's favor. Yang Tao had fewer troops and was weak. Jiang Pingji could fight 2 against 1 with ease. The outcome of the battle was not optimistic. Chapter 15-19. As mentioned earlier, the waters in Zhangzhou were developed and pirates ran amok. These pirates, who had been operating for many years, seemed to be of humble origins, but in fact they were inextricably linked to the officials of various counties. If not for that, it would not have been so difficult for Yang Jian to clear out the pirates back then. Of course, these relationships could not be exposed to the public, so they could only interact in secret. In order to protect their family business from being affected, some aristocratic families also had interests entangled with the pirates. They even had spies planted in these water bandits. Yang Si and the others used fishing to enforce the law, destroying many water bandits and recruiting many young and strong pirates. Among them were spies. Through these spies, the aristocratic family sent friendly messages to Fu Wang and the others, hoping to form a good relationship. Fu Wang and the others thought about it and knew that it was unreliable. They did not know if it was their own behavior or Yang Tao's instructions. Feng Zhen was from Zhangzhou's Anshan County and was a descendant of an aristocratic family. He was quite familiar with the tricks of this circle. He said, "I'm just testing them. Whether or not my lord can conquer Zhangzhou, it will be good for them." If Jiang Pingji conquered Zhangzhou, they would have a natural advantage by choosing sides in advance. Even if it was only a little, it would be good. If Jiang Pingji failed and they did not show any obvious behavior of choosing sides, Yang Tao could not settle the score with them. Over the next few days he received several letters from several families. Yang Si could not help but sneer and ridicule. Yang Tao hasn't fallen yet, but they can't sit still. They have no loyalty at all. Feng Zhen shook his head and said, This is just their instinct to seek benefits and avoid harm. Fu Wang also said, such despicable people cannot be trusted. After all, Zhangzhou was Yang Tao's territory. Who knew if there were spies planted by him among these people who seemed to be surrendering? Although they were suspicious, they still had to accept the letter. Otherwise, it would be a loss to completely push them into Yang Tao's arms. It was better to hang around with an ambiguous attitude. When some aristocratic families saw that their goodwill did not receive a positive response, they were a little flustered. At this time, Fu Wang led the troops to attack Dafeng, which was south of Zhangzhou. Qi Kuang was in charge of the navy. The troops were divided into two routes and advanced by water. Dafeng was a small place. Due to its geographical advantage and convenient water route from south to north, it was relatively prosperous and had a large floating population. As one of Zhangzhou's gateways, Dafeng had a certain military weight due to its smooth waterway and the advantage of connecting the north and the south. The county magistrate's surname was Xia, and he was born into a local aristocratic family. Seeing Fu Wang's army approaching menacingly, he immediately broke out in a cold sweat. Feng Zhen thought about it carefully, then smiled and said, "This person likes to sail with the wind and has a timid temperament. General, why don't you give him a scare?" Fu Wang looked at Feng Zhen. "How?" Feng Zhen said, "Secretly send a letter to them, ordering them to open the city gates and surrender in 3 days. Otherwise we will slaughter all the commoners." Yang Si rolled his eyes at Feng Zhen. Was this kid for real? No matter which era it was in, massacres would always be criticized and no one dared to speak of it lightly. Fu Wang shook his head and said, "No, if word of this gets out, it will inevitably damage the Lord's reputation." Feng Zhen said, "It's just to scare people. It's not like we're really mobilizing troops to massacre the city. General, please don't worry." Yang Si's eyes almost rolled to the top of his head as he sneered, "Feng Longzi, can't you come up with some reliable ideas?" Feng Zhen said, "You don't know that Yang Jian's former subordinates aren't in Daifeng. On the contrary, many of the local rich families have some minor conflicts with Yang Jian. Years ago, Yang Jian led troops to clear out the pirates and found out that a few of the rich families in Daifeng were in cahoots with the pirates. If it weren't for the fact that someone was adamantly stopping him, Yang Jian would probably have killed them all. Knowing that defending the city was hopeless, they wouldn't sacrifice their lives to defend Daifeng for Yang Tao. If we can take this place without bloodshed, it will more or less serve as a deterrent. This will also be a great boost to the morale of our army." Yang Si said, "There's always a chance." Feng Zhen said, "If they refuse to surrender, then we'll use troops to knock down the city gates of Daifeng. After that, we'll frame the massacre on the county magistrate guarding the city. We'll say that he's afraid of the might of our army and worried that the commoners will flee, so he purposely spread rumors to discredit the Lord. It's just a matter of a few words." History books were written by the victors and the losers had no right to speak. After hearing this, Yang Si revealed an indescribable expression. He cupped his hands at Yang Si and said in a strange tone, "This humble one is convinced." When Feng Longzi was shameless, he was almost comparable to the Lord. He had lost. Fu Wang adopted Feng Zhen's opinion and issued a letter of challenge. When County Magistrate Xia saw Fu Wang's threat, his legs suddenly turned to jelly. According to the letter of challenge, Fu Wang would lead the 80,000 troops to attack Daifeng. If they didn't know what was good for them, the 80,000 troops could trample Daifeng to the ground with 1 foot. If he resisted stubbornly, the result would be the lives of his family and the lives of all the commoners in the city. What should we do? There are only 8,000 troops in the city. How can we fight against 80,000? County Magistrate Xia was indeed as Feng Zhen had said. He had a timid personality and didn't have his own opinions at critical moments. People didn't know how good Jiang Pingji's troops were in water battles, but they were good at sieging cities. The advisor asked, "Did the Duke of Jingzha not send reinforcements?" County Magistrate Xia was so anxious that he was sweating profusely. He couldn't help but complain, "Yang Tao's troops are short on horses and there are gaps everywhere. How can he care about Daifeng? The letter has already been sent out. The earliest reinforcements will arrive is 7 or 8 days. How can we withstand the ravages of those animals?" Yang Tao also had his own difficulties, but County Magistrate Xia wouldn't understand. Instead he was full of complaints. "Do you think Fu Wang and the others will really massacre the city?" Mu Xian said, "It's hard to say. Lu Shi is restrained by the Nie family and most of his troops are trapped in the north. Fu Wang has led troops to attack Zhangzhou for a long time, but he hasn't achieved anything yet. If we use the massacre to intimidate everyone, Fu Wang will encounter fewer obstacles when he attacks Zhangzhou from the south. The people in Zhangzhou weren't of one mind. The gentry all had their own plans. If they saw that things weren't going well, they would easily jump ship. If they used the massacre to show their strength, they might really be able to scare the counties along the way into surrendering. County Magistrate Xia became even more flustered when he heard this. The advisor continued, "We can roughly tell whether the situation is favorable or not. This is especially true for the strength of the two feudal lords. Lu Shi's troops are strong, and the navy's combat power is also extraordinary. On the other hand, Yang Tao has spent too much of his troops in the alliance with Nanxing. How can he have the strength to deal with Lu Shi now? In my opinion, even if County Magistrate is doing this for the safety of the people in the city, you have to consider this letter of challenge carefully. No matter how sturdy the Daifang was, could it compare to the passes and cities that Jiang Pingji had previously pried open as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood? In terms of military strength, they only had 10% of the enemies. Not even the shadow of the reinforcements could be seen. They couldn't defend even if they wanted to. Instead of defending to the death and sacrificing the lives of all the people in the city, it was better to take the initiative to surrender to the enemy. Furthermore, Chapter 1520. These conspiracy theories wrong Yang Tao. He wasn't a despicable person and he wouldn't risk the war for the sake of personal revenge. The arrival of the reinforcements was normal, but the timing of Dafang's surrender was abnormal. Yang Si was drinking tea to quench his thirst when he suddenly heard that Xia County Magistrate had secretly sent someone over to negotiate. He spat out a mouthful of tea, drenching Feng Zhen's sleeve. Feng Zhen almost jumped up from where he stood. His face was not only angry but also full of disdain. Fu Wang saw that the two were about to start fighting again, so he smiled and stepped forward to separate them. Military foresight is amazing. That Dafang County Magistrate is indeed a cowardly, selfish person. Fu Wang smiled and flattered Feng Zhen, calming his anger at Yang Si's saliva on his sleeve. But Yang Si wasn't easy to deal with either. They sent someone over to negotiate. They might not be surrendering. Perhaps they're just pretending to surrender. Feng Zhen laughed coldly. If they had that kind of courage and unyielding character, Yang Jian wouldn't have died so tragically back then. The powers in Zhangzhou were far more complicated than outsiders could imagine. Landowning families stood in great numbers and powerful people rose up together. Their interests had already reached a delicate balance. Who would have thought that Yang Jian would appear out of nowhere and break the balance? Some people were convinced by his heroism, but more people didn't like him. At the root of it all, it was because Yang Jian's unyielding attitude had affected the interests of Zhangzhou's landowning families. Rather than saying that Yang Jian had been poisoned by Zhao Xiao, it was more accurate to say that he had died because of the landowning family's indifference. Yang Jian was dead. The hothead who had been eyeing their cake and destroying their interests was gone. Who knew how they would celebrate in secret? Yang Tao's personality wasn't as unyielding as Yang Jian's, and his methods weren't as forceful. That was why the backlash wasn't as severe. If Yang Tao's personality was the same as his father's, Yang Tao would have been plotted against a long time ago. This group of people was born to pursue benefits. They were willing to follow whoever could bring them a prosperous future and allow their families to continue to prosper. This rule didn't just apply to the landowning families of Zhangzhou. It applied to other people as well. When Yang Tao could bring them benefits, Yang Tao was their lord. When Yang Tao could not even protect himself, this group of people began to plan for themselves. Loyalty? What was that? Those who were truly proud and unyielding were often the ones who died the earliest and most tragic deaths. Those landowning households had lived longer than a 1,000-year-old tortoise. Which one of them wasn't an expert at seeking benefits and avoiding harm? In the face of the threat and pressure of the 80,000 troops, the county magistrate of Dangfang County had long been scared out of his wits. It was expected that he would surrender. Backbone? How much is that thing worth? Just as Feng Zhen had expected, the Dangfang County magistrate had sent people over to surrender, and the messenger had been extremely flattering. Seeing this, Yang Si could not be bothered to argue anymore. Otherwise he would be slapped in the face by Feng Zhen again. Zhangzhou was Feng Zhen's hometown, his home ground. It would be great if the people we meet along the way were all so tactful. Although Fu Wang loved to fight, he also knew that people would die in battle. His old brothers had died one by one, and now, when he found someone to drink with, it was always a new face. It would be the best if they could conquer Zhangzhou without shedding any blood. Unfortunately, this was just a daydream. Yang Si smiled and said, "General Fu, this isn't a good thing." Fu Wang asked him in surprise, "Why do you say that? Isn't it good for the enemy to surrender?" Yang Si said, "There are many people who have surrendered. Can you tell which ones are sincere and which ones are pretending to surrender and are waiting for a good opportunity?" If the road was filled with people who had surrendered, Yang Si would be so scared that he wouldn't be able to sleep. Fu Wang said, "What the military counselor said makes sense." County Magistrate Xia opened the city gates and surrendered without another word. He was very guilty, and so were the landowning households in the city. No one actually went to inform Yang Tao. When Yang Tao's reinforcements arrived nearby, he realized that something was wrong. He sent a few scouts disguised as refugees to scout for news. Not long after, the scouts returned. They told the general that there were no signs of a siege at the city gates, but the flag on the city walls had been changed to a flag with the surname Lu. The general who led the troops knew what had happened. He was furious and cut a withered tree at the side with his sword. These despicable people. Are they trying to kill us and then wag their tails at the new master to claim credit? The general was so angry that his chest rose and fell violently, but he couldn't care less about his anger now. He could only immediately turn around and leave with his troops. 80,000 elites were stationed in Dafeng, and the level of land warfare of the soldiers under Jiang Pingji's command was well known. The general didn't want to fight against the elites with an exhausted army after a long journey. However, he was still a step too late. Fu Wang led the troops to cut off their retreat. The two armies had a scuffle in the suburbs outside Dafeng City. After a fierce battle, the crows circling in the sky refused to leave for a long time. Broken limbs and wreckage were everywhere. The reinforcements sent by Yang Tao suffered heavy casualties. Chapter 1521. Yang Tao didn't understand. "What do you mean?" Yan Lin's eyes were cold as he said, "Lu Shi's advisor, Feng Zhen, is from Zhangzhou's Anshan County. He was born into an aristocratic family and is very familiar with the powers in Zhangzhou. He probably knows which families are willing to join him and which families are not. Therefore, if they wanted to set up a trap, Yan Lin couldn't choose Yang Tao's people. The trick of injuring oneself to gain sympathy depended on the target. It was useless against a heartless animal like Feng Zhen. He wouldn't trust him even if he killed him. "I have a good candidate." Yang Tao asked, "Who?" "The Zhao family. Zhao Xiao's Zhao family. Years ago, Zhao Xiao caused Yang Jian's death and brought his family to seek refuge with the fake emperor, Prince Changshu. Later, he followed Prince Changxing to Nanxing and secretly ran back to Dongqing. He even became Su Bei's guest minister. He was known as the best thief and was as sly as a mudfish. Yang Tao was also a man who could distinguish between kindness and hatred. He only wanted to kill the person who killed his father, so he didn't vent his anger on the Zhao family. However, Yang Tao didn't kill anyone, but the Zhao family didn't dare to relax. They were always on tenterhooks, afraid that Yang Tao would find them to settle old scores. If that happened, they wouldn't even be able to escape. The Zhao family was the happiest when Jiang Pingji called. It was no surprise that the Zhao family would defect to the enemy. Xiaoyang means to use them as candidates to fake their surrender? Are you sure? This isn't digging their own graves? Yang Tao didn't kill the other members of the Zhao family, but he had been secretly suppressing them in recent years. When he was in a bad mood, he would vent his anger on them. From a fundamental point of view, the Zhao family and Yang Tao were going in opposite directions. There was no way the Zhao family would help Yang Tao complete his plan. It was already good enough that they didn't betray Yang Tao. Yan Lin nodded, then shook his head. "For now, the Zhao family is the most suitable candidate. Feng Zhen and the others won't suspect them," Yan Lin said. "Whether it's the Zhao family or the other gentry families, they all have to face an awkward problem when they grow bigger. The number of family members increases, and there are many conflicts between the branches. There are even examples of blood brothers turning against each other, not to mention a big family. It's impossible for everyone to be of one mind." Yang Si and the others had thought of feigning surrender, but they had never thought that Yang Tao would place his hopes on the Zhao clan. This sword move was unconventional, it was too unconventional. Yan Lin secretly sent people to detain the target's parents, wife and children. Since the target was unwilling to do so, he had no choice but to do it. Since the county magistrate surrendered without even fighting, and the reinforcements sent by Yang Tao were intercepted by Fu Wang and his men, the morale of Zhangzhou's people plummeted. Fu Wang led his troops to advance southward with an unstoppable momentum. It only took him a month to reap a considerable harvest. Seeing that the situation was becoming clearer and clearer, the landowning households who had been hesitant immediately switched sides. Their secret letters were also sent more frequently, and the contents were no longer vague and ambiguous. Fu Wang sneered as he finished reading. He treasured the letters one by one. These were all for his lord to read. To put it nicely, these people were very sensible and had bet on the right person. To put it bluntly, he had no backbone and was useless. Yang Tao hadn't lost yet, but they were already singing the bad news and sending flirtatious glances to the enemy. How could his lord rest assured with people with such bad characters? For example, if his lord was unfortunately faced with a situation like Yang Tao's one day, would these despicable people jump out and kick her when she was down? Fu Wang sneered. Humph, they're not loyal once, but they'll never be loyal again. They still don't understand our lord's temperament. As the war unfolded, more and more landowning households changed sides. Some even brought their families over to seek refuge. The Zhao clan? Which Zhao clan? There were many landowning households with the same surname, and there were also a few landowning households with the surname Zhao in Zhangzhou. Yang Si glanced at it and smiled mysteriously. So it's this Zhao clan. Zhao Xiao was from the same landowning household. Yang Si even had an inexplicable ill-fated relationship with Zhao Xiao. Back then, Zhao Xiao mocked Yang Si at the Hongmen banquet for being the son of a prostitute. Yang Si immediately retorted, but he was still angry when he returned. When it came to holding a grudge, Yang Si ranked in the top 3. Not long after, his lord brought people to attack the Barbican city. Yang Si secretly concealed Zhao Xiao's whereabouts. He watched as Zhao Xiao was tortured by a few refugees until he was physically and mentally exhausted and couldn't close the door properly. Then he personally witnessed Zhao Xiao being punished with a wooden basin. Only then did he satisfactorily write off this grudge. Because of Zhao Xiao, Yang Si didn't have a good impression of the Zhao clan. Feng Jin said, "The Zhao clan has been living in fear all these years. I'm afraid they haven't been doing well." Yang Si laughed. It'd be strange if they were doing well, right? Zhao Xiao is Yang Tao's enemy who killed his father. Now that the Zhao clan is under Yang Tao's control, they have no choice but to tuck their tails between their legs. Now that we're leading troops to attack Zhangzhou, the Zhao clan will probably be overjoyed. Look, they're hurriedly flying over. The Zhao clan was sincerely seeking refuge. Not only did they offer a lot of their family's savings, but they also gave a proof of allegiance. This proof of allegiance was the Great Universal Geographical Map of several main river basins in Zhangzhou. It also marked the distribution of Yang Tao's troops. This is really generous, but does the military advisor think it's trustworthy? Fu Wang first saw the information, but then he became suspicious. He was a little stunned that such a big pie had fallen from the sky. Yang Si asked Feng Jin, "Is the relationship between the Zhao clan and Yang Tao really like fire and water?" Feng Jin said, "Yang Tao often oppresses the Zhao clan. How good do you think their relationship is?" "If that's the case, this Great Universal Geographical Map is real?" Feng Jin frowned. The Zhao clan's allegiance is real, but the Great Universal Geographical Map needs to be discussed. General, why don't you send someone to test them again? The results of the test were that there were no problems. Not everyone could have the Great Universal Geographical Map. Otherwise, how could it be called a military secret? If they used it as a proof of allegiance, the Zhao clan's future would be promising. Why would they present a fake map and put themselves in a difficult position? Feng Jin said, "Yang Tao doesn't tolerate the Zhao clan. If they offend the Lord again, how can they have a foothold? I'm afraid they'll want to die." After confirming the authenticity of the Great Universal Geographical Map, the wariness in everyone's hearts disappeared. They had previously drawn a map of the waters surrounding Zhangzhou after clearing out the bandits, but the mountains and rivers within the borders were still unclear. With the help of this Great Universal Geographical Map, the difficulty of taking down Zhangzhou would be greatly reduced. Fu Wang was in a good mood. Maybe we can take down Zhangzhou before the Lord forces the Nye clan to retreat. Little did they know that this was just a trap set up by Yan Lin. Most of the Great Universal Geographical Map was real. Only the small details were fake, but it was these details that were enough to affect the direction of the entire battle. Yang Tao asked his friend, "Has Xiaoyang been unhappy with the Zhao clan for a long time?" Yan Lin asked with his eyes. Yang Tao said, "Once we lose the battle, Fu Wang and the others will find out that the Great Universal Geographical Map is fake. The Zhao clan, who presented the Great Universal Geographical Map, will probably have to bear the full responsibility. Regardless of whether the Zhao clan really betrayed them or not, they would still end up with their heads broken." Chapter 1522. Yang Tao smiled. If that's the case, the Zhaos won't be able to explain themselves no matter how many times they open their mouths. Why bother? Even though he had killed his father, Yang Tao hadn't done anything to the Zhaos over the years. At most, he had suppressed them a little so that they wouldn't be able to rise again. The Zhao's status in Zhangzhou wasn't as high as it used to be, but at least they didn't have to worry about their lives. Now, in order to seek a better future, the Zhao family betrayed one side and sided with the other when the Willow family and the Willow family were at war. They used the war as a capital to climb the ladder to heaven and advance. Were they not afraid of climbing too high and falling from the sky, turning into meat paste? If they were unhappy with Yang Tao, they should have waited until he was defeated before throwing themselves at the enemy. To put it bluntly, their impatience was due to greed. How could the icing on the cake compare to providing timely help? Yanlin looked down and sneered. Everyone has their own fate. If the Zhaos are destroyed, they have only themselves to blame. In troubled times, it was wrong not to pick a side, but it was also wrong to pick the wrong side. The Zhaos could only blame themselves for being short-sighted and unlucky. Whether it was Jiang Pingji or the other nobles, they all hated fickle and treacherous people from the bottom of their hearts. Yanlin had used Jiang Pingji's hands to kill the Zhaos. That was the end they deserved. Yang Tao and Yanlin watched the Zhao's fate coldly, but the Zhaos didn't think so. Once Yang Tao is destroyed, we can finally put down the knife on our necks. Ever since Yang Tao had risen again, the Zhaos had been trembling with fear, afraid that he would kill them one day. Now that they sided with Jiang Pingji and presented the universal geographical map, they still had to worry about the future of the Zhaos. When the rewards were given after the war, the Zhaos would also be ranked. They might not be able to cover the sky with one hand in Zhangzhou, but they would at least be a big shot. Yang Tao has a strong foundation in Zhangzhou. The troops under his command are the elite navy left by Yang Jian. Leader, do you think they? The advisor looked worried and said, Lu Shi's troops are strong, but fighting on land and on water can't be compared. Don't worry about that. The leader of the Zhao clan was very confident in Jiang Pingji. According to the spies that Zhao family had planted in the water stockade and then incorporated into the army, the navy under Jiang Pingji's command was in good spirits. One could not tell that they were cowardly in the face of the great river in the north. If it was a water battle, even if their combat strength was inferior to Yang Tao's, they could still win by relying on numbers. They had the army stop for half a day and sent dozens of soldiers on small boats to check out the situation in the waters. After investigating for an hour, they suddenly realized that the waters were very dangerous. The small boats were fine, but the battleships that could carry hundreds of people had a deep draft. If they sailed over, they would most likely hit the reefs and sink. The commander of the navy discovered the problem and immediately realized that the intelligence given by his superiors was wrong. There was something fishy going on, so he hurriedly prepared to return. The other navy had bad luck. They ran into the enemy's main force, which was waiting for them. The battle was extremely fierce. Feng Zhen was not the only one who was angry. Yanlin and the others did not look happy either. The tent was quiet. No one dared to even breathe. They could not help but look at the culprit. Yanlin was sitting on the right side of Yang Tao. The bamboo report in his hand had been crushed by him. He did not even feel the thorns piercing into his skin. Yang Tao and Yanlin had grown up together. He knew what it was like to be angry, so he secretly shivered. Xiaoyang, this battle is not without gains. Yang Tao wanted to plead for his generals, but his friend's aura was too oppressive. The more he spoke, the weaker he became. He only dared to speak in a low voice. According to Yanlin's plan, they would definitely take down Jiang Pingji's 30,000 navy and make them all ghosts on the river. When it came to actual action, the result was far less than expected. Not only was the enemy's operation beyond their expectations, but the ability of their own generals was also disappointing. As mentioned earlier, Feng Zhen planned to take advantage of the upper class. He sent the elites of the three armies downstream to attack the target as fast as possible. There were 3 groups of elites, but only 2 of them actually fought. The third group of enemies realized that something was wrong and planned to retreat. What made Yanlin's heart ache was that the ambushing troops did not move at all. They did not try to stop the enemy. They just watched as the enemy retreated. Were they pigs? Who was the leader of the ambushing troops? Yanlin glanced at the name. Not only was his heart aching, but his head was also hurting. Chapter 1523. He was supposed to spend the rest of his life at home, but because of his disappointing children, he had to put on his armor again for the sake of his descendants. He begged Yang Tao to give him a chance to fight. Yang Tao was a sentimental man. The old man was not only Yang Jian's martial arts master when he was young, but he had also protected Yang Jian from many fatal wounds. He had been at his beck and call for more than 20 years. Yang Tao couldn't refuse, so he agreed. It was a pity that the old man was too old. He often acted like an old man and used his old friendship with Yang Jian to pressure people. Yang Tao had a good temper, so he didn't take it to heart. The old man loved to drink when he was young, but he knew his limits and didn't dare to break military discipline. Yang Tao knew this. He didn't think it was a big deal that the old man liked to drink, as long as he could control his liquor at critical moments. But now things were different. Perhaps it was because he had been living at home for a few years that his temper had become arrogant. He was stupid and willful. It was such an important setup, but not only did he not raise his guard, he even got drunk in front of the formation. After the enemy took the initiative to retreat, the group of soldiers looked at each other in confusion. They did not know what to do and did not dare to act on their own without the general's order. The vice commander could only call for the old man. In the end, he got angry and splashed a bucket of water on the old man to wake him up. It was too late. They chased after the enemy, but the enemy's warships were already far away. They couldn't catch up. Therefore, other than a few warships that sank at the beginning, they didn't suffer any other losses. The other two groups of navy were ambushed along the way and were caught unprepared. They encountered battles along the way and the enemy outnumbered them by a factor of 2. The two groups of navy lost more than 10,000 warships and hundreds of warships. It wasn't a bad result, but everyone could see that according to Yen Lin's calculations, the enemy's losses were even greater. If they had performed well, they could have wiped out 20,000 of the enemy's navy. But they let 10,000 of them escape. What a joke. Opportunities on the battlefield were fleeting. If they missed this opportunity, they didn't know when they would get another. Yen Lin wasn't the kind of person to lose his temper, nor would he blame an innocent general. He calmed down and asked about the situation at the front. After a while, he noticed a fatal problem. Whether it was the ambushed group or the ones that were engaged in head-on battles, the enemy had to rely on brute force to break through. Those who dared to fight in the water so recklessly could only rely on one thing: warships. The result of the investigation was as Yen Lin had expected. The enemy's warship was indeed unique. Fortunately, our army has just won a small battle. It should be able to eliminate the influence of the rumors. If he was blessed by the heavens, how could he lose to a mortal? Chen Su also laughed. This battle came in time. Otherwise, our army would be very passive. Yen Lin couldn't laugh. He was in charge of the entire army and knew the current situation of his army. After all, the battle at Nanxing had consumed too much energy. Before they could recover, they had to fight Jiangpingji again. They were weak. This news couldn't be spread to prevent the stability of the army from being affected. Yang Tao's camp was half happy and half worried. Feng Zhen's camp was full of thunder and lightning. It looked like a fellow cultivator had passed the tribulation and ascended. The people of the Zhao family were detained. The leader of the Zhao family, who had presented the universal geographical map, was brought to the front of the crowd. The leader looked confused. You presented a fake map and killed tens of thousands of my soldiers. You deserve to die, you villain. Fu Wang gritted his teeth. He unsheathed his sword and placed it across the leader's neck, drawing a thin red line. The leader of the Zhao family was scared out of his wits. He hurriedly said, "General, what do you mean? Why are you accusing me?" Feng Zhen threw the universal geographical map on the leader's face. His expression was extremely cold. "This is the map you presented." When had the leader of the Zhao family ever been humiliated like this? However, with the enemy's sword on his neck, he could only swallow his anger for the sake of his life. He opened the universal geographical map with trembling hands and looked at it carefully. This is indeed the universal geographical map I presented. The map is fake, Yang Si sneered. Yang Si sneered and said, "TSK, you colluded with Yang Tao to use fake pictures to harm people. What a loyal dog." The Zhao family and Yang Tao hated each other so much. How could they let bygones be bygones? Chapter 1524. Fake? How could the universal geographical map be fake? Someone must be trying to frame us. The Zhao clan leader's heart skipped a beat. All the blood drained from his face, leaving behind a frighteningly pale face. His eyes were as big as goldfish. He wasn't stupid. He knew what would happen to the Zhao clan if the universal geographical map was fake. Extermination would be considered a light punishment. Feng Zhen only smiled coldly. Fu Wang's eyes were full of murderous intent, and the Zhao clan leader didn't dare look him in the eye. He was so flustered that he didn't know where to put his hands. He could only seize the opportunity to defend himself. Yang Tao has suppressed the Zhao clan many times. Because of his power, we could only swallow our anger and give in again and again. We've been looking forward to it for a long time, and finally, the Duke of Lanting has graced us with his presence. The entire Zhao clan is overjoyed. We've finally escaped from the tiger's mouth. Why would we help Yang Tao? Yang Si asked him. The universal geographical map was presented by you, wasn't it? The Zhao clan leader nodded with some hesitation. Yes. This fake universal geographical map caused our deployment to go wrong. We fell into the enemy's trap and lost tens of thousands of elite soldiers, wasn't it? The universal geographical map must have been replaced. The map presented by the Zhao clan is definitely not a problem. The Zhao clan leader felt even more hopeless after hearing this. He stammered, the Zhao clan is truly loyal to Duke Lanting. I hope that the general and the military counselor will investigate carefully and prove our innocence. Yang Si smiled coldly. The fake map was presented by the Zhao clan. Of course you have to bear the responsibility. Even if the universal geographical map was really replaced, you have failed in your duties. The lives of your entire clan won't be enough. When the Zhao clan leader heard this, he immediately understood Yang Si's plan. His heart went cold as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. Why are you talking so much nonsense with him, military counselor? Lock up all his clansmen and investigate them one by one. Fu Wang had never been a good-tempered person. They had lost tens of thousands of sailors in one go. If his lord investigated, he would take the blame. Just thinking about it made him grit his teeth in hatred. He couldn't help but twist the Zhao clan leader's head off with his bare hands. If it's a fake surrender, they'll all be turned to dust. No matter how much the leader of the Zhao clan cried out, he couldn't change the fate of his entire clan being imprisoned. After careful investigation, Feng Zhen and the others had locked onto a certain member of the Zhao clan as a suspect. On the eve of the incident, the man had packed his belongings and was ready to escape. However, his luck was a little bad. Halfway through his escape, he was stopped by his pursuers at a certain pier and was tied up and brought back. Although this person was from a branch family, he was doing quite well. He was usually dressed in gold and silver, so when had he ever been treated like this? Tell me the truth and I might leave you with a whole corpse. Feng Zhen had been too confident. He had played with eagles all his life, but he had almost been pecked blind by an eagle. This time he had lost tens of thousands of elite sailors. It was a painful lesson, but it wasn't to the point where his bones were broken. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to absolve himself of the blame even if he died 10,000 times. Why did you capture me? Then why did you pack your bags and flee? Feng Zhen countered. The Zhao clan has been implicated because of you, and their extinction is imminent. As a member of the Zhao clan, you will naturally share blessings and misfortunes, and follow them to the Yellow Springs. Tell me, why did I capture you? The man's hands were tied behind his back with hemp rope. He knelt on the ground, his head drooping to his chest, not daring to raise his head. What, you have nothing to say? Feng Zhen laughed coldly and confidently. Did you swap this fake great universal geographical map? The man's body trembled faintly, and his Adam's apple squirmed as he swallowed. Feng Zhen continued, your parents, wife and child? You said they were ambushed and killed by the pirates, but in reality they were detained by Yang Tao, weren't they? Since you already know, why bother asking? The man saw that Feng Zhen had even guessed this, so he simply threw caution to the wind and admitted to all his crimes. This was all my doing. I will take responsibility for my actions alone, and it has nothing to do with the clan. Feng Zhen laughed. He didn't know whether to call the man stupid or smart. You say this to absolve the clan, but do you think it's possible? The man countered. What, is the Duke of Lanting someone who can't tell right from wrong, and would actually implicate the entire clan for one person's crimes? He insisted that he was the one who did it. If Jiang Pingji held the entire clan responsible, wouldn't that be killing the innocent? However, Feng Zhen wasn't a simple person. How could he let the man beat around the bush with just a few words? If I can kill the entire clan to prevent this from happening again, why not? Feng Zhen laughed coldly. The Zhao family clearly had the intention of rebelling, but they pushed all the blame onto you. Did they really think that they could escape the fate of extinction by doing so? In their dreams. After hearing this, the man's expression revealed his disbelief. Your wife, child and parents are in Yang Tao's hands, right? Feng Zhen raised his hand and pinched the man's chin, forcing him to look up at him. His seemingly thin hand was extremely strong, and he easily left several purple fingerprints on the man's face. Remember to walk slowly on the road to the underworld and wait for them. What do you mean? What do I mean? The day we conquer Zhangzhou and capture Yang Tao is the day your family goes to the underworld to find you. Feng Zhen suppressed the urge to strangle the man and laughed coldly. If we don't make the entire Zhao family pay with their lives, how will the tens of thousands of souls who drowned in the river rest in peace? Casualties were inevitable in a battle between two armies, but the deaths had to be worthwhile. Feng Zhen wouldn't blame Yan Lin who came up with this evil plan, because this was a normal battle between two armies. Conspiracies and overt plots were normal. You could plot against others and others could plot against you. It was just a matter of who was more skilled. However, he couldn't tolerate the villains involved. The Zhao family brought their entire clan to seek refuge, but they presented the fake map. They deserved to die. Because they had lost a battle, Yang Tao's side was full of vigor. The gentry who had been throwing flirtatious glances at Jiang Pingji didn't make a move again. The secret report Jiang Pingji received was about the Zhao family. These gentry in Zhangzhou. Are they all itching for a beating? The more he looked, the angrier he became, especially when he saw the number of casualties on his side. His heart burned with anger. Do they really think the feudal lords are like radishes and cabbages in the market that they can pick and choose? Yang Tao was weak, so the gentry in Zhangzhou kept throwing flirtatious glances at Jiang Pingji. Their attitudes were ambiguous. Yang Tao had won a great victory, so the gentry's stance changed again. The gentry who had pledged their allegiance to Jiang Pingji were also restless. When had she ever been so picky? Did they really think Jiang Pingji was easy to talk to? Regarding the Zhao family, Jiang Pingji had the same thoughts as Feng Zhen and the others. If she allowed this incident to set a precedent, the gentry who pledged their allegiance to her in the future would pull out some petty tricks and drag one of their clansmen out to take the blame. Her prestige and reputation as a feudal lord would be swept away. How could she defend herself? Qiguanrang said, "This is what Yang Tao wanted." Indeed, Yang Tao had taken Jiang Pingji's sword and killed the entire Zhao family. He had avenged his father's last bit, and his reputation hadn't been damaged. Chapter 1525. Jiang Pingji knew that Yang Tao would clap his hands and celebrate if she killed Zhao Shi, but she still wanted to kill her. She wanted to use this move to make the aristocrats of Zhangzhou think about it carefully. She also wanted them to understand that the fight for the feudal lords of the world was not something they could pick and choose at will. They could jump ship, but they had to know their place. If they dared to be disloyal, then they couldn't blame the god-slaying sword in her hand. I hate betrayal the most. She was actually very easy to talk to as long as they didn't cross her line. Once he stepped on it, there would be nothing left to say. Apart from that, there was also the punishment for Feng Zhen's mistake. She planned to settle the score after the war. Yan Lin is not to be underestimated, but Feng Zixi really underestimated him. Qiguanrang and Wei Xi walked out and talked about what had happened in a low voice. Everyone could tell that Jiang Pingji wanted to give Feng Zhen a chance. She didn't want to punish him severely. Of course, she couldn't punish him severely because Feng Zhen wasn't the only one to blame. I agree with the first part, but I disagree with the second part. Wei Xi smiled. Yan Lin helped the reckless Yang Tao get to where he is today. He must have some skills. It's not right to say that Zixi underestimated him. If Wenjing was Zixi, would you have fallen into his trap? Wei Xi knew that Qiguanrang's temperament was very similar to his lord's. They didn't use people they didn't trust. No matter how one looked at it, it was reasonable for Zhao Shi to surrender. No one would believe that Zhao Shi, who had a grudge against Yang Tao, would help Yang Tao set someone up. Therefore, after accepting Zhao Shi, even if he had doubts about the universal geographical map, he had to use it. As long as he used the map, Yan Lin's plan would be half successful. The other half would depend on the outcome of the battle. Based on the fake map, Yan Lin had predicted the enemy's layout in advance. He had chosen the right 3 ambushes. It showed how difficult Yan Lin was to deal with. Even with Wei Xi's experience from his previous life, he wouldn't be able to win against Yan Lin. Qiguanrang frowned and said gloomily, "It's hard to say. I'll most likely fall into his trap." Yan Lin's plan was not something that could be avoided by a cautious and suspicious person. Wei Xi was not surprised by Qiguanrang's answer. Based on what happened in her past life, Qiguanrang was the one who fought Yan Lin, not Feng Zhen. He even suffered a few losses at Yan Lin's hands. Although they won the battle, it was not an easy victory. If Qiguanrang had not lured Yang Tao into the trap of capturing Yan Lin, Yang Tao, who was as tough as a cockroach, would still have been alive and kicking for months. The two armies would have suffered even more losses. Of course, it wasn't that Qiguanrang was worse than Yan Lin. Even though Qiguanrang's ascension to the top of the scholar roll of the Golden Scale Pavilion in his previous life was partly due to political factors, it was mostly due to his personal strength. Scholars all had their own specialties. It would be difficult to compete with each other. Yan Lin had the home advantage. Whether it was Qiguanrang or Feng Zhen, it was expected that they would suffer losses at his hands. The only difference was whether the losses were greater or lesser. Tao was Yan Si. Were to kill 10,000 elite navy soldiers were Yanzhu. Yang said. To say. Yang said Yang. Yang is Wei Yang's Yang. Wei Si I didn't know much about the war because he hadn't experienced it himself. He only knew about the armaments and casualties of the two armies. This is a long war. Winning or losing doesn't mean anything. Wei Si I smiled. When Zheng, you have some confidence in Zisher. He may not be serious, but he's reliable at critical moments. Qiguanrang snorted coldly, declining to comment. Hey, isn't that Dalong from the Feng family? Why are you standing there in a daze? With his sharp eyes, Wei Si saw Feng Yi standing outside his tent waiting for someone and called out to her with a smile. Feng Yi bowed to Wei Si and Qiguanrang. Greetings, uncles. Wei Si lifted the curtain and smiled. It's still hot outside. Come in and have a seat. Feng Yi nodded. Qiguanrang asked, Are you here about your father? Feng Yi said, Yes. I'm feeling uneasy. After hesitating for a long time, I decided to come and see what you're up to. You're very honest. If it was your father, he'd probably try to deceive you. Qiguanrang's usually stiff face revealed an unnatural smile. You don't have to worry about this. My lord doesn't mean to punish me. When your father returns in triumph, I'll make amends for my mistakes. With uncle's words, I'm relieved. Feng Yi heaved a sigh of relief and immediately revealed an embarrassed blush. He explained in a slightly awkward manner, Just now, I received a letter from my mother. I was just worried that if this matter reached home she would be worried. So that was the case. Wei Si was amused. No wonder the steady Feng Yi would come to see what he was up to. Seeing Feng Yi leave, Qiguanrang said, Although they're mother and son, they have a good relationship. I really don't know how this Feng Longzi did it. He's useless and unsteady, but his wife is smart and capable. His son is also a good seedling. It's enviable. Wei Si said sourly, Maybe he'll have better seedlings in the future. Feng Yu He should have eliminated this child when he was selecting the study companions of the crown prince. Why was the pig in Feng Zhen's house eyeing the good cabbages in other people's courtyards? Qiguanrang asked faintly, Can Feng Longzi still make it? Feng Zhen drank alcohol and took hanshi powder. Although he quit under the Lord's tyranny, could his seed still survive? Wei Si revealed an indescribable expression. What was the point of asking him if Feng Zhen could make it? However, he really did know. This was a pain in the ass. Wei Si didn't struggle for too long. Soon he was called away by the messenger who ran over. My lord is busy. Qiguanrang revealed a complicated expression after hearing this. He stretched out his hand towards Wei Si, indicating that he should go. He didn't need to be called. The messenger said again, My lord has summoned both military counselors. Qiguanrang responded with an oh. There was no awkwardness on his expressionless face. He smoothed out the folds of his sleeves. The two of them went to the commander's tent together. What's going on now? Qiguanrang was curious. Wei Si didn't know either. He only said, You'll know when you get there. Just like the two of them, everyone returned to their respective tents. They hadn't even sat down when they were called over by their lord. They came a few times a day. Their legs were so thin that they could walk. The Nya army seems to have the intention of withdrawing. Everyone had just arrived when Jiang Pingji said such a sentence. Everyone was collectively dumbfounded. Withdrawing? The Nya army? It couldn't be. They refused to withdraw even when Ye Liang knelt down. Why would they withdraw now? Wei Si frowned and said, Could it be that there's a problem at the rear? Wei Si had also heard of the trivial matters of the Nye family. When Ye Liang was still alive, they still knew to be cautious. Now that Nye Liang was dying of illness and Ye Qing was in a hurry to take over, how would Nye Liang's uncles be willing to see a grandson defecate on their heads? Chapter 1526. Everyone looked at each other and fell into deep thought. Qiguanrang asked, Apart from that, did the Nye army make any other moves? Jiang Pingji said, I just received intelligence from the scouts at the front line that the Nye army is indeed slowly withdrawing. The defense is extremely tight. If the scouts weren't capable and the horses weren't fast, I'm afraid they wouldn't have made it back. We sent out 5 teams of scouts today, but only 4 returned. As a mobile unit to investigate the enemy's situation and counter reconnaissance, the importance of the scouts was undeniable. The scouts under Jiang Pingji's tent were special forces who had undergone special training. Many reconnaissance and counter-reconnaissance techniques were taught by Jiang Pingji in a booklet. Scouting the terrain, drinking water, and even drawing topographical maps were not a problem. Their mastery of combat belonged to the group of people at the peak of the military camp. To facilitate the scouts' work, Jiang Pingji equipped them with horses of the northern borderline. The harness was also specially made. Not only were they fast, but they also had strong endurance and explosive power. They had an advantage in mobility. They could escape immediately if they encountered a large group of enemies and save their lives. Under such circumstances, the scouts suffered such heavy casualties. Could only mean one thing: the enemy was secretly making a big move. Qiguan Rang asked again, "Is there any news from Zhongzhou?" Jiang Pingji rested her chin on her hand and said, "The 2 places are far apart. By the time the news arrives, the Nye army would have withdrawn long ago." Once again she could not help but complain about the backward means of communication in this world. At the same time, she missed the technology that allowed people to communicate across galaxies in her previous life. Indeed, technology changed life in the form of war. If she was given a mecha now, she could ascend to the throne in a short while. Under the circumstances of insufficient information, they could only use limited clues to determine the true situation of the enemy. Sun Wen frowned and said, "Nye Liang was quite capable. He could suppress a few uncles in the Nye family when he was alive. However, his death was too sudden. He didn't have time to give instructions." A group of old officials hastily pushed Nye Liang's son, Nye Qing, to the throne. Nye Qing is gentle and kind. I'm afraid he won't be able to suppress the demons and monsters of the Nye family. Nye Qing only has a few thousand troops with him. If there's a mutiny in the Nye family... What Sun Wen said was exactly what Wei Ci and Qiguan Rang were thinking. Nye Liang died suddenly. There was no time to pave the way for his son, Nye Qing, to pave the way for his son. If there was a mutiny in the Nye family to seize power and Nye Qing was in danger, it would not be difficult to explain Wei Ci's anxiousness and retreat secretly. However, was that really the case? Jiang Pingji knitted her brows tightly, as if she was going through a difficult decision. The salted fishes also learned to think. After thinking about it, they still chose to cheer for Wei Ci and the rest. Xingyuan Miao Miao. Salted fish doesn't need to use his brain to watch the live stream. He just needs to learn how to cheer for the military counselor. Shui Yuexiang. From the current clues, it seems that there is something wrong with the Nye family. The streamer can't just let the tiger return to the mountain and let Wei Dan and the others retreat, right? If they left, then so be it. If they turned around and went back to pacify the situation in the country, then the host's battle would have been in vain. Adhering to the principle of take your life while you're down, the streamer should send troops to chase after the Nye clan's army so that they can't take care of both the front and the back. More than 200,000 troops were held back by Jiang Pingji. Nye Qing died in the Nye family's internal strife without any support. This plot was simply wonderful. I'm not a bar spirit. No, I don't think it's that simple. What if this was a trap to lure the tiger away from the mountain? The host had sent troops out of the pass to chase after the enemy, but the enemy had taken a detour to attack Zhanjiang Pass. If so, wouldn't the streamer be in a passive position? I'm not a bar spirit. However, according to the current clues, it's obvious that the Nye clan is in internal strife and Nye Qing is in danger. Is the streamer going to miss this opportunity and watch the enemy swagger away? Letting the tiger return to the mountain will cause endless trouble in the future. Nye Liang led more than 200,000 troops to fight the war. Jiang Pingji led troops to guard the pass. How much manpower, material, and financial resources did she expend? If the enemy left just like that, they would come back every few days for a stroll. Wouldn't the streamer's finances collapse? Jiang Pingji closed her eyes and didn't look at the bullet screen. She was deep in thought. After a while, she heard hurried footsteps coming from outside the tent. Report, the enemy has sent a letter of challenge. They've asked us to fight in 3 days. The messenger handed the letter of challenge that Wei Dan had personally written to Wei Ci, who then passed it to Jiang Pingji. She opened the tactical manual and took a look. Her right eyebrow was raised and there seemed to be a flash of light in her eyes. Regardless of whether it was the emperor in the previous life or the lord in this life, This expression meant one thing: she was angry. You're really petty. You wrote a letter of challenge and you don't forget to curse. Are you trying to bully me because I'm illiterate? Jiang Pingji muttered and resisted the urge to crumple the letter of challenge into a ball. Did I kill Wei Zishuan's wife or dig up his family's ancestral grave? At most, she angered Wei Dan's lord to death and abducted his younger brother. It wasn't a big grudge. Was there a need to curse so fiercely? Wei Ci knew what was written in the letter of challenge. His elder brother usually looked gentle, elegant, dignified, and polite, but he was quite vicious in his cursing. He remembered that in the previous life, he had written an elegy in front of Nielyang's morning hall. The first half of the elegy praised Nielyang to the heavens. In the second half, he mocked and insulted the villain who poisoned him. He cursed the person who poisoned him from head to toe, from his parents to his deceased ancestors. Wei Ci didn't know who poisoned him, but he later heard that Nielyang's two uncles had fainted in front of the morning hall. Qiguan Rang took a look at the contents of the letter of challenge. There weren't many real words of challenge. The rest were sarcastic greetings. Of course, the words of a scholar wouldn't be so vulgar, not to mention that this was a letter of challenge. But it was infuriating enough. Qiguan Rang said calmly, "He's just someone who likes to flaunt his eloquence. My lord, you don't have to be angry with him." Jiang Pingji said, "How am I such a petty person?" No matter how harsh a scholar's cursing was, it was just that. When Jiang Pingji had just started streaming, the insults from the haters in the streaming room were spectacular. She could even ignore the vulgar insults that carried the organs of her parents and ancestors, not to mention those of Wei Dan's level. In comparison, she was more concerned about Wei Dan's purpose of challenging her. The scout had just sent the news back and Wei Dan had written a letter of challenge. No one would believe that he didn't have any ulterior motives. Everyone was obviously thinking the same thing as Jiang Pingji. Was Wei Dan's letter of challenge an invitation or was he trying to cover it up? Jiang Pingji tapped her fingers on the brand new bronze table. She frowned slightly. The previous table had been destroyed and melted down by her merciless abuse. Qin Gong said, "This lowly general is willing to fight." Zhangjiang Pass wasn't the Nye family's backyard. She could come and go as she pleased. She had to catch up with him and beat him up. Chapter 1527. There is no movement from Lu Shi's side. Did he see through our plan? Fan Chen was very panicked, but Wei Yong was not in a hurry. He could only suppress his anxiety. How did she see through it? Wei Yong's eyebrows did not even rise as he sneered. Other than a few trusted generals who participated in the battle, no one else knows about this. They all think that the Nye family is in chaos and the young master is in trouble. In this kind of situation, if Lu Shi can escape. Wei Yong paused suspiciously for a moment, disdain appearing in the depths of his eyes. Then, this is probably fate. He never believed in this. Fan Chen and Wei Yong had a good relationship and had a certain understanding of the latter. Ever since the previous master Nielyang died of illness, Wei Yong had changed. Fan Chen could not say exactly what had changed, but it was definitely not a good change. Fan Chen expressed his understanding of this. In the mortal world, boring bodies were everywhere, and interesting souls were 1 in 10,000. How rare was it to meet someone who understood him? After the previous master Nielyang died of illness, while Wei Yong had not reached the level of broken zither and broken string, he had been somewhat disheartened. If the previous master had not entrusted his son Nye Qing to Wei Yong before he died, Wei Yong would have wanted to retire. Fan Chen was not making this up. Just from how Wei Yong addressed Nye Qing and Nielyang he could tell. Everyone had changed to address Nye Qing as Lord. Only Wei Yong stubbornly called him young master. He was clearly unwilling to accept the reality of Nielyang's death. If Nye Qing was not Wei Yong's son-in-law and student, and the two were like father and son, just this address would have thoroughly offended Nye Qing. The old master had died of illness and been buried, but the old subject was still unwilling to accept reality. Where did Wei Yong plan to place the new master? No matter how broad-minded a person, once they reached this position, Nye Qing could not completely ignore it. Even if it was just a little dissatisfaction over time, it would be enough to destroy the friendship between Nye Qing and Wei Yong. Thinking of this, Fan Chen reminded in a low voice to prevent Wei Yong from stepping on a landmine in the future. The previous master has passed away for a long time, and Zi Shun is a reasonable person. No matter how good your relationship with the present lord, you are not biological father and son. The way you address me, you should change it. Don't embarrass the lord. Out of the corner of his eyes, Wei Yong glanced at the orange afterglow on the horizon. His lips were tightly pursed and he seemed a little stubborn. Fan Chen said, "The previous lord has already left. By doing this, other than making others look at the lord differently and suspect that the lord's position was not obtained through proper means, there is no other meaning. If someone uses this to make a big deal out of it, not only will Her Highness be passive, but you won't be able to get anything out of it either." Wei Yun said, "My lord hasn't really left yet." Fan Chen's heart jumped. The previous master wasn't dead? But, Wei Yong added, the scheme he set up before his death hasn't ended. How can you say that he's gone? Next time, speak more swiftly and finish it in one breath. Fan Chen nearly choked on his words as he grumbled, "You almost scared me to death." Wei Yong said calmly, "When this matter is over, Yong will personally apologize to the young master." Fan Chen laughed. "You're still so stubborn." On the other hand, Jiang Pingji had investigated more evidence that the Nye camp was preparing to withdraw its troops. Although the camp was still there and the patrolling troops were normal, the scouts secretly discovered that these patrolling soldiers appeared very frequently. A certain soldier with a scar on his face appeared 3 times in a short period of an hour. Obviously, the enemy wanted to use this to create the illusion that there were sufficient soldiers in the camp to cover up the fact that they were secretly withdrawing their troops. Qiguan Rang said, "In that case, Wei Yong's letter of challenge is also trying to cover it up. If they really waited for the agreed time to send out the troops, perhaps the enemy's camp would have already been emptied and they would have directly stood them up." Bai Ning stepped forward and cupped his fists. "Time waits for no man. My lord, please make a decision soon." If she hesitated any longer, they would be completely exposed. Jiang Pingji closed her eyes and pondered. She was still hesitant and did not immediately give the order to send out the troops. Given Jiang Pingji's overly decisive character, this was extremely rare. Qiguan Rang asked her, "My lord, do you suspect that something is wrong? I can't put my feelings into words. I just feel that it's too smooth and it's somewhat surreal." Jiang Pingji said, "The Nye clan mightily brought more than 200,000 troops to attack Zhanjiang Pass, but now they have to flee pathetically because of the internal strife. I always feel that it's very dramatic." Jiang Pingji thought for a long time before she found such a word to describe the current situation. The Nye clan had really attacked Zhanjiang Pass a few times, and Jiang Pingji had successfully stopped them. In the end, neither side gained any benefits. Jiang Pingji's side suffered great losses, but the Nye clan's side suffered little. Nye Liang had already folded in. Qiguan Rang said, "The battlefield is like this. Opportunities are fleeting. The Nye clan doesn't have the upper hand and there's internal strife. It's reasonable for them to withdraw their troops." "That's true." Jiang Pingji no longer hesitated. She successively gave several orders, and the generals stepped forward one by one. The tent was filled with a tense atmosphere of impending war. According to the scouts' investigation, the Nye camp's army had unusual movements in the middle of the night. It was calm during the day, so they most likely took advantage of the cover of the night to retreat in batches. Jiang Pingji set the timing for the battle at midnight to attack and pursue the enemy at night. Night fell quietly. On the other side, the general Qin Gong polished the weapons in his hands over and over again until they were shiny. The war horses were also fed with horse fodder. Bai Ning laughed and teased Qin Gong. "You don't look like you're going to war. You look more like a handsome man meeting a beautiful woman in the middle of the night." Qin Gong was considered young among the people, but Bai Ning did not take advantage of his seniority. Instead, he treated him as an equal, so they had a good relationship. "General Bai, what are you talking about?" Qin Gong blushed. "I already have someone I like. It's easy to cause misunderstandings by saying these things." Bai Ning laughed. "She's not here. No matter how much I joke, she won't hear it." Qin Gong said seriously, "Even so, if I echo General Bai's words, it'll be too frivolous for her." Bai Ning curled his lips and said, "Fine, another papa ear." Qin Gong understood what papa ear meant, and he blushed a little. Bai Ning smiled and rested his hand on Qin Gong's shoulder. He joked, "When do you plan to get married? Let me attend the wedding banquet." Qin Gong raised a flag for the masses. "When this battle is over, she'll be of marriageable age. After I ask her elders for their opinion, I'll apply for leave from the Lord to prepare for the wedding." Although Su Yanxiao's parents and uncles had passed away, her eldest aunt and cousins were still alive. The Su family also had other members. If Su Yanxiao wanted to get married, those people had the right to know even if they didn't have the right to decide. Qin Gong's family had always been a vassal of the Su family. Su Yanxiao was the daughter of Su Fei, a direct branch of the Su family. If she really married him, there would definitely be people who would be dissatisfied. However, Qin Gong was not afraid of this. If Su Yanxiao was willing to marry him, he would protect her for life. Bai Ning laughed. There are many marriages in the world. You're lucky. Don't forget about the wedding banquet. Qin Gong said shyly, Of course I won't forget. General Bai, you must drink until you're drunk. Rather than worrying like this, it would be better to just marry her. He would treat her like a treasure. Qin Gong was Jiang Pingji's trusted general. If Su Yanxiao married him, no one would dare to underestimate her in the future. Jiang Pingji smiled. I'm so envious. Qin Gong was puzzled. Is my lord envious of this general? Jiang Pingji said, It's good to be young. Isn't it enviable? Qin Gong was confused. He didn't know what was so enviable about being young. This had nothing to do with what his lord had said before. But he could also tell that his lord was very much in favor of his marriage with Su Yanxiao. This made Qin Gong heave a sigh of relief. He wasn't afraid of anything else, but he was afraid that his lord wouldn't agree. If that happened, Qin Gong would be in a difficult position. He could either give up on Su Yanxiao or resign and live in seclusion. If he asked himself honestly, the possibility of him choosing the latter was higher. Remember to leave a cup of wedding wine for me. Qin Gong smiled. Yes, my lord. While they were chatting, the army was ready to set off. Jiang Pingji mounted her horse. My lord, what are you doing? Qin Gong was shocked. Was his lord going too? It's not good to be idle all the time. My bones are getting hard, Jiang Pingji said. Let's set off. Qin Gong was speechless. Was it really because of this willful reason? Qin Gong missed his old lord Su Fei very much. Although Su Fei wasn't very smart, he wouldn't be so bold as to rush to the front lines. The army set off in 3 directions. Jiang Pingji's expression was not very good. Her brows were tightly knitted. She led the army and set off naturally, not because she wanted to fight a war. She just had a bad premonition. This was a kind of natural intuition that had been honed through countless life and death experiences. It was hard to explain, but this intuition had saved her many times. The army quietly approached the enemy's camp. The scouts who set off first quickly returned with news. Reporting to my lord, the enemy's camp is empty. The shadows in the tents are all straw branches. Judging from the ashes of the bonfire in the camp, they should have left less than 15 minutes ago. They split into 3 directions to outflank the enemy's camp, but they didn't expect the enemy to have already retreated. Qin Gong and Bai Ning each led a group of troops. When they heard the scouts' report, they immediately gave the order to chase after them. The enemy left in a hurry. They left some heavy and clumsy military supplies and rations in the camp that were not suitable to be taken away. It could be seen that the enemy left in a hurry. If they caught up with the enemy at this time, they would definitely win a great victory when the enemy was unprepared. Jiang Pingji felt that something was wrong. Her troops did not move. She asked the scout, How's the bonfire? The scout said, Some are still burning, some have been extinguished. It's a mess. Jiang Pingji asked again, What about the footprints near the bonfire? The scout recalled carefully and reported truthfully. The footprints near the bonfire were a little messy. Jiang Pingji asked a few more questions in succession, such as the layout of the enemy's camp. The more she listened, the more she frowned. The general who was sent by the military counselors to protect his lord was puzzled. He asked, My lord, is there something wrong? Jiang Pingji grabbed the reins and said coldly, There are many things wrong. They had the energy to prepare straw branches to disguise as human shadows. It can be seen that they were quite calm when they retreated. If that's the case, the bonfire, documents, and objects shouldn't be so messy. The general's heart turned cold after he heard that. He exclaimed, Could it be a trap? Jiang Pingji sneered. I'm afraid we've been fooled. Send 2 groups of troops to recall Qin Gong and the others. I'm afraid there's an ambush ahead. The general asked, Don't we need to send troops to support them? Jiang Pingji smiled. We should also welcome our guests. Let's deal with the enemy first. Give the order, get into formation and face the enemy. Not long after Jiang Pingji finished speaking, the enemy's battle cries suddenly rang out in the previously empty enemy's camp. They seemed to have appeared out of thin air. Arrows rained down from the sky. The enemy's sneak attack was astonishingly fast. Many people were hit before they could react. They're hiding underground. Jiang Pingji revealed how the enemy appeared out of thin air in one sentence. It wasn't that there was no one in the camp. They were all hiding underground. Because the camp was very messy, it was impossible for the soldiers to move the items and check them one by one. As long as the soldiers spread out their sleeping mats and covered the holes where they were hiding, they would basically not be discovered. Chapter 1529. What are you waiting for? Let's go back. Jiang Pingji pulled out her god-slaying sword. Her eyes were fierce. The deputy general said, "Yes, sir." Jiang Pingji wanted to rush out and kill to her heart's content, but she still needed to command the army to defend against the enemy's sneak attack and seize the opportunity to counterattack. The enemy seized the initiative. As soon as they arrived, they rained arrows and disrupted the army's formation. Under such circumstances, if there was no chief commander to command and dispatch, the casualties would be terrible when the enemy rushed in. Jiang Pingji was reckless, but she never delayed important matters. I wonder how Feng Jing and the others are doing. These troops were indeed elites who had been trained for many years. Jiang Pingji often arranged military exercises and rehearsed all kinds of unexpected situations. Therefore, even though the enemy seized the initiative this time, they reacted after the first wave of arrows. They shrank their formation and adopted a defensive formation. This was the method of minimizing losses. At the same time, it could reflect the true combat quality of an army. At the same time, the scouts sent by Jiang Pingji also desperately chased after Qin Gong and Bai Ning's troops. Unfortunately, it was night and visibility was limited. It took them a lot of effort to find the route of the two troops. They hurriedly chased after them, which wasted a lot of time. By the time they caught up with the two troops, the situation had changed. Bai Ning was cautious by nature. Even if he led the troops to chase after the enemy, he would still consider his surroundings. Therefore he was slower. When the scouts caught up, the army had not yet been ambushed. Bai Ning was also very surprised by the appearance of the scouts. The scouts did not have time to turn over and dismount from their horses. They directly conveyed the order. Retreat. Bai Ning was stunned at first, then he immediately understood something. He immediately ordered the army to turn around and retreat. However, the enemy was secretly watching them. The army's retreat was obvious, so they could not sit still. The originally pitch-black call suddenly lit up with countless orange flames, and countless fire arrows descended from the sky. Bai Ning was shocked, but he still looked calm on the surface. The soldiers also seemed to have taken a tranquilizer. They defended and retreated in an orderly manner at the same time. Was he not panicking? How could it be? He was panicking to death. He never thought that this was a trap set by the enemy. However, Bai Ning knew that as the chief commander, he could not panic. Once he panicked, the army would be like headless flies. They would run around without order and be surrounded and killed by the enemy sooner or later. If Bai Ning's luck was considered good, then Qin Gong's side was quite unlucky. He had completely stepped into the enemy's trap. When the scouts arrived, the scene was already in chaos. The two armies were fighting each other. The light of the fire spread, almost turning this part of the world into daylight. The soldiers' battle cries were sharp and resounding, as if they were about to pierce through one's eardrums. The enemy's sneak attack was quite sudden. Although Qin Gong was not injured, he remembered the time when he followed Yangtze and was blocked by Han Yu in the Langsa Canyon. He couldn't help but laugh bitterly. What kind of lousy luck did he have to be ambushed time and time again? It used to be Han Yu and now it was Wei Yong. However, they were lucky to have been saved by the Lord last time. Now they could only rely on themselves and the soldiers around them. If he didn't fight for a way out, he would probably be buried here. At this moment, Qin Gong was still thinking about what his lord had said before he sent out the troops. It's better not to say things like, "I'm going to get married after this battle, so that my wife and children can stay by my side." I don't know where I heard this before, but those who said this before the war basically never came back. Never to return? The enemy had set up this sneak attack with the intention of making them never come back. Qin Gong didn't want to die here. He still had to make contributions and accumulate merits, so that he could go back and marry the eldest lady of the Su family and protect her for the rest of her life. In the distant rear, Su Yanxiao suddenly woke up in the middle of the night. The maid who was sleeping outside put on some clothes and came over. Is the eldest lady going to get up at night? When the maid brought the candle closer, she saw that Su Yanxiao's nightgown was almost soaked with sweat. No. I just had a very scary dream, but now that I'm awake, I can't remember what it was. The maid also said, "Look at the eldest lady's face covered with sweat, it must have been a nightmare." I'm going to ask the kitchen to prepare a bowl of soup for you. Su Yanxiao shook her head. No, it's the middle of the night. I won't be able to sleep after drinking soup. The maid said, if that's the case, I'll stay and talk with the eldest lady for a while. Su Yanxiao nodded lightly. The maid beside her was sent by Qin Gong. She was careful, considerate, and efficient. She quite liked her. When she thought of Qin Gong, an unexplainable panic rose in her left chest. Eldest lady, are you feeling uncomfortable? The maid saw her raising her hand to cover her chest, frowning slightly and her lips pale. She suddenly became nervous. Su Yanxiao said, the dream I had just now seemed to be related to Qin Sanlang. Did something happen to him at the front? Since the two of them had a tacit understanding, Su Yanxiao changed the way she addressed him and called him Qin Sanlang. It was neither too intimate nor too distant. The maid said, old people always say that dreams are the opposite of reality. Qin Langjun is good at fighting, how could something happen to him? Su Yanxiao was skeptical, but she still felt uneasy. The maid tried to coax her to sleep. Su Yanxiao couldn't help but put her hand under the pillow, and her fingertips touched a cold jade hairpin. I learned it from the craftsman. This fox hairpin is crudely carved. When the war at the front is over, I'll give it to the eldest lady. Su Yanxiao couldn't help but hold it tightly as if it could absorb some strength. You said you would come back and marry me? She had been embroidering a wedding dress these days, and it would be finished in half a year, just in time for her hairpin ceremony. After that, they would get married. The maid heard her whisper and laughed. Apart from the eldest lady, who else could Qin Langjun have in his heart? Su Yanxiao couldn't help but blush, and her flustered mood calmed down a lot. The situation on Qin Gong's side was indeed not that bad. Relying on the valiant fighting quality of the army, even if the enemy's attack was fierce, they could still maintain their formation and not collapse. As the battle dragged on, the situation gradually stabilized. After all, Qin Gong was immortal and he couldn't be invulnerable. He was seriously injured in the chaos, but he didn't seem to feel it. He commanded the enemy to kill, and seized the opportunity to break out of the encirclement. We shouldn't continue fighting. Since this is the enemy's trap, the longer we delay, the more disadvantageous it will be for us. Qin Gong was injured, but his mind was very clear. In the face of the enemy's ambush, they could only try to reduce their losses. Of the 36 stratagems, retreat is the best. The deputy general on the side said, General, do you feel that something is wrong? Qin Gong covered his arm and his expression was somewhat fierce. The number of the enemy's troops is strange. They most likely divided their troops to attack Zhanjiang Pass. Since this was a killing trap set by the enemy, it meant that the previous retreat of the Nye family due to internal strife was fake. The enemy still had more than 200,000 troops. Even if they divided their troops into 3 groups, the number of troops lying in ambush was obviously not that many. It was not difficult to speculate that the enemy was very likely to transfer the remaining troops to attack Zhanjiang Pass. Luring the enemy into the trap, luring the tiger away from the mountain, one was linked to the other and it was clearly a killing trap. The deputy general said, General, what should we do? Chapter 1530. I've long heard that Lu Shi has many elites under his command, but I didn't expect that we couldn't keep them here. Fan Qin watched as the enemy fought and retreated, and his heart was filled with impatience and indescribable helplessness. If it had been any other vassal's army, they would have long been thrown into disarray after encountering such an ambush. Not to mention retreating in a short period of time, it was already a blessing from the heavens that the entire army had not been wiped out. Comparisons were odious. Was Jiang Pingji born to teach other feudal vassals how to behave? Jiang Pingji was not only the legendary child of another family, but also the lord of another family. There was nothing to be envious of. The trusted general in charge of the ambush rode forward and asked Fan Chen's opinion with a solemn expression. Military counselor, should we pursue them? Of course. Zixuan has given a strict order to delay as much time as possible. Fan Chen raised his hand to wipe the hot sweat from his forehead. His inner shirt, which was stuck to his neck, was drenched. He said, Lu Shi's subordinates are all clever. I guess they've discovered that the number of troops ambushing them isn't right. Even if they think with their toes, they'll know that we'll deploy troops to attack Zhanjiang Pass. Yes, sir. The general didn't dare to waste time. He ordered the troops to pursue the enemy. They couldn't let the enemy ruin their plan. General, they're catching up. The deputy general's face was covered in blood. Only his black eyes were clean. Don't panic. Just fight and retreat. Qin Gong's expression was firm. His face was covered in blood, making the brown scar on his face look even more terrifying. Is that Nye camp ahead? When we left, the fire wasn't so strong. The deputy general said, General, do you mean, there are enemies over there? Qin Gong's expression was solemn. The Lord is ambushed over there. We have to rush there no matter what. According to the scouts sent by the Lord, she was ambushed at Nye camp. However, Nye camp had long been empty. Where did the ambush come from? After thinking about it, Qin Gong thought of the underground. The enemy was most likely hiding underground and hiding from the eyes and ears of our army. However, how did they hide the soil from our scouts when they dug so many pits to hide people? The person who arranged this ambush was truly terrifying. Whether it was in terms of scheming a person's heart or in other aspects, it was almost flawless. Zijiang had a bad feeling when he heard this. The Lord had been ambushed in the enemy's lair. What kind of F***ck was that? Zhanjiang Pass? Not only was the deputy general worried about his lord, but he was also worried about his own nest. He was really worried that his nest would be destroyed. Qin Gong said confidently, Zhanjiang Pass has sufficient troops, and there are a few strategists overseeing it. We won't lose it. Due to the enemy's relentless pursuit, Qin Gong's side had to pay a few more casualties before they managed to shake off their pursuers. Along the way, they bumped into the remnants of Bai Ning's army. If they hadn't reacted in time, they might have had to fight in the dark. Brother Qin, you're not dead, right? Qin Gong smiled bitterly as he pulled out the arrow from his arm. He took out a piece of cloth and tied it around the wound, temporarily stopping the bleeding. He was in so much pain that his face was pale. He said in a loud voice, I'm not dead. I'm alive and kicking. Bai Ning said, reorganize the troops, turn around and kill these bugs that are chasing us. Qin Gong panted heavily and said, the Lord has been ambushed. General Bai, it's better not to continue fighting. Bai Ning waved his hand and said casually, that's easy. Brother Qin, take half of the troops to support the Lord. I'll lead some people to delay the pursuers. At that moment there was no better way. Qin Gong cupped his fists and said, General Bai, take care. No problem. Bai Ning laughed. I didn't get to drink your wedding wine and my precious daughter's wedding wine. When I go to hell I'll make a scene. Qin Gong ordered half of the troops to support Jiang Pingji. Seeing that he had left, Bai Ning angrily spat out a mouthful of blood and clenched the blood-stained weapon in his hand. The sticky blood had dried up and some of it was still warm. He shouted in the direction of the enemy. All troops fall into formation. As soon as he finished speaking, the soldiers on the side raised their horns and blew them to convey the military order. As soon as the military order was given, the soldiers with shields lined up in the first echelon, forming a thick defensive wall on one side. The other hand held a long spear that was more than 10 feet long to block the first enemy that rushed up. The second echelon of soldiers also held long spears and assisted in cleaning up the fish that slipped through the net. The archers were in the third echelon, trying their best to seize the opportunity to cause heavy damage to the enemy. Bai Ning said in a gruff voice, I'm standing here. No one can get past me. Although Bai Ning was not young, his archery skills were ranked among the best in the army. His specialty was shooting 7 arrows at the same time. He used a 2-stone heavy bow. When he shot an arrow, not only could he poke a hole in a person's head, but he could also skewer the next person. The eyes of the two sides were bloodshot. Bai Ning's quiver was out of ammunition, so he picked up his weapon and rushed forward. He killed until his weapon was bent. At the same time, the situation on Jiang Pingji's side was much better than Bai Ning and Qin Gong had imagined. Apart from the unexpected first wave of sneak attacks, they basically did not suffer much in the subsequent confrontations. People could not see the entire battle situation, but Jiang Pingji had a spiritual realm. Within the realm, even flying insects and mosquitoes were under her control, not to mention people. She knew where the army was the weakest, where they needed support, and where the enemy could break through. Under her command, the army calmly withdrew from the enemy's ambush. How could the enemy let go of a fat piece of meat that was already in their mouths? Of course they would bite like mad dogs. My lord, the reinforcements are here. Jiang Pingji frowned slightly. What's going on with the reinforcements? It was impossible for reinforcements to come at this time. Jiang Pingji was a very cautious person. Even if she led the army to attack the enemy, she was prepared for a sneak attack on her base. It was better to be safe than sorry. Even if all the information showed that Nye Liang did not have the opportunity to clean up the hidden dangers within the Nye family, Jiang Pingji had laughed at this point. At that time she mocked Niel Yang for being too soft on his people, but in the end he was the one who suffered the consequences. The last time she received news from the Nye family was only 3 to 5 days before Niel Yang died of illness. The few tumors of the Nye family were still alive and well. According to the time of Niel Yang's death, even if he instructed Wei Yong and the others to clean up the tumors before he died, it was reasonable to say that it was too late. Due to various reasons, Jiang Pingji was skeptical about the two speculations of internal strife in the Nye family and Wei Yong's withdrawal of troops. Now that they had encountered an ambush, it proved that the two speculations were false. Not only did Wei Yong not withdraw his troops, but it was very likely that he had mobilized his troops to attack Zhanjiang Pass. The ambush was just a ploy to delay the troops. Countless thoughts flashed through Jiang Pingji's mind. The soldier said, "The reinforcements were brought by General Qin." Not long after he finished speaking, Qin Gong, who was covered in blood, had already ridden forward. "My lord, are you all right?" "I'm fine." Jiang Pingji asked, "Did you meet General Bai on the way?" Chapter 1531. My lord, Zhanjiang Pass. Although Qin Gong looked confident, he was not sure if Zhanjiang Pass could be defended against a sneak attack. Jiang Pingji said, "Don't worry. I told Wen Zheng and the rest to be careful before the army set off. Zhanjiang Pass will definitely not be lost." Qin Gong was slightly relieved, but he still had doubts. Jiang Pingji noticed this and smiled to comfort him. "If Zhanjiang Pass is breached, I will hug the keyboard and kneel in front of the old chief until I die." Qin Gong was speechless. "Old chief? Keyboard? What the hell?" Jiang Pingji coughed softly and covered up her words perfectly. She was getting more and more adept at lying. "The old chief was the one who gave me the strange book in my dream. Later he continued to teach me in my dream. He's like a teacher and a friend." Qin Gong suddenly realized. "I see." What she said was not entirely false. The old chief had indeed trained her meticulously in the few years between choosing his successor and retiring. Teacher and friend. It was not wrong to use these words to describe their relationship. Jiang Pingji was a wolf. She was aggressive and liked to cause trouble. She wanted to challenge the authority and position of the alpha wolf all the time. The new and old chief often fought because of disagreements. The old chief was a man who looked like a smiling tiger but was tough on the inside. Jiang Pingji was tough and arrogant from the inside out. One was the alpha wolf who was about to retire, the other was the new alpha wolf. It would be strange if they did not fight. Of course, the old chief had been a commander for more than 100 years and had been through countless wars. Jiang Pingji was still a new driver on the road. Even if she could fight, she was tortured badly at first. Later on, she barely managed to fight to a draw. It was the only time they tied. Jiang Pingji suspected that the other party went easy on her. "I'm leaving tomorrow. The 7th Army is the best army in the Federation. I hope you don't ruin its reputation." Jiang Pingji was so tired that she could not even move her fingers. Her mouth was still hard and smelly. "The future belongs to more outstanding young people. The 7th Army will become stronger and sharper in my hands. No one will dare to offend me." Look at what she said. She was just short of saying that the other party was old and should have given up his position long ago. However, the old general smiled and said, "All right, I'll leave the faith of the 7th Army to you." The two women were sweating profusely as they lay on the training ground. Compared to Jiang Pingji's disheveled appearance, the other woman was still standing. I still don't know why the old general retired." "You're not old enough to retire. The average lifespan of a commoner in the Federation was around 250 years. Someone like Jiang Pingji could live up to 500 years. At that time, the old chief was only a little more than 200. He was at the prime of his life. Otherwise, he would not have been able to suppress Jiang Pingji, who was an unreasonable wolf cub. In fact, this old commander's position in the Federation was second only to the marshal, and he was extremely experienced. Just because they had a lifespan of 500 years did not mean that they would live to be 500 years old. The average lifespan of a soldier in the army was less than 100 years old. Even though a legion commander was a high-ranking member of the army, it was still a high-risk job. 99% of legion commanders died on the front lines. Very few of them died of old age, let alone retire midway. At that time, many people even mocked the 1st Battle Legion for producing a coward who was afraid of death. "My body is not suited to stay in this position. It looks fine now, but I don't know when it will collapse. You'll know the inside story when you have a higher level of authority." The old chief sighed. The 7th Legion has always been the vanguard with the strongest combat power. I won't be able to hold on for long, but the 7th Legion must have a capable and unyielding successor who can carry the flag. Jiang Pingji was speechless. Was it because she was the best at fighting? If the old chief's current combat state was not good, then what about when he was at his peak? The more she thought about it, the more annoyed she became. The old chief sneered. What are you thinking about? I'm thinking about when I'll be able to press you to the ground and beat you up. Hey, you went easy on me just now. The amount of water you used was comparable to a dam releasing water. Was she a salted fish that needed to go easy on him? You haven't awakened yet. Even if my condition has deteriorated, I won't lose to a girl who hasn't awakened yet. Jiang Pingji looked at the rising flames in the Nye camp. She did not know why she thought of the past. At that time she was too tired. She was exhausted after the fierce battle. In the end, the old chief carried her to the warm cabin like a burlap sack. When she woke up, the old chief had already packed his things and left the military headquarters. Jiang Pingji was in a hurry to take office. The front line of the Federation was at war again, so she forgot about this matter. Now that she thought about it, she suddenly remembered something. What the hell did the old chief mean by awakening? It was fine if she did not remember, but now that she remembered, she had to clarify. It was the same logic as obsessive-compulsive disorder. She would feel uncomfortable if she did not clarify. However, before that, there was one more thing to do. Jiang Pingji took Qin Gong and the troops under her tent to rescue Bai Ning. Bai Ning was in a sorry state at that moment. His arms and thighs were injured, and the armor on his body was tattered. Many parts of the armor were pockmarked by the enemy's weapons. If it was not for the fact that the armor was well made and that he had been injured for Bai Ning a few times, he would have been dismounted and trampled into meat paste by the chaotic army. He did not have time to check the condition of his wound. After killing a wave of enemies in a hurry, he used a strip of cloth to stop the bleeding. His left hand was almost numb. Their side suffered heavy casualties, but the enemy did not gain much advantage either. The number of casualties was also high. However, because of the disparity in military strength, Bai Ning's side could not hold on for much longer. Once the army's formation was broken by the enemy, the result would be 1,000 miles of retreat and they would be crushed into meat paste by the enemy. Let's fight to the death with these bastards. It's not a loss to die here. Bai Ning's eyes were bloodshot. Even though he was injured all over, he did not care. Kill one to recoup his losses, kill two to earn a small profit. Even if he died, he would drag a few more down with him. Just as Bai Ning was about to launch the last attack, the enemy ordered the archers to release a rain of arrows again. In the end, an unexpected turn of events occurred. Because it was night time, the pale golden ripples that shrouded the army were particularly clear. A miracle? Nye Jun saw this, and his high and mighty momentum instantly dropped. The arrows stopped in mid-air as if they were intercepted by the layer of ripples. They lost their momentum and fell with a rustle, hitting Bai Ning's head. My lord is here? He had seen this scene before, and he was sure that it was his lord. Is his life more important than yours? Jiang Pingji led the troops over. When she saw Bai Ning's sorry state, she suddenly became angry. Are a bunch of good-for-nothings worth paying with your life? Jiang Pingji reprimanded Bai Ning angrily. Bai Ning was prepared to fight to the death, but now that his lord was here, he did not know what expression to put on. He could only listen to the reprimand obediently. Little did he know that his seemingly majestic lord was also being reprimanded by another person. Yuaba, you were ambushed and attacked. Where is your spiritual realm? Jiang Pingji quibbled. I didn't want to cheat too much, so my realm only covered a few feet around me. Yuaba, it's obvious that you've been pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger for too long. What's the use of these excuses? The old chief's mouth is quite sharp. Yuaba, if you return to the Federation in this state, won't the 7th Army be assimilated into a pig farm? Not using too much ability doesn't mean that you have to be schemed against like real people in ancient times. Jiang Xiaojiu, I've prepared the keyboard for you. Chapter 1532. My lord. Bai Ning clearly felt that his lord's mood was not right. He didn't dare to raise his voice for fear of igniting the firecracker. Jiang Pingji gripped the hilt of her sword tightly and sneered, order the soldiers to get into formation and face the enemy. Tonight no one can leave. Bai Ning's body trembled and his voice was like thunder. Yes, my lord. Ordinary soldiers couldn't feel it, but Qin Gong and Bai Ning, who were near Jiang Pingji, were secretly shocked. Most of the generals who had some achievements in martial arts could feel qi, such as the enemy's murderous aura and the murderous intent in the dark. Their awareness combined with their reflexes, which had been trained for a long time, allowed them to avoid many fatal attacks. The stronger their martial arts, the clearer their perception. There was no doubt that Qin Gong, who became famous at a young age, and Bai Ning, who was experienced and ruthless, belonged to this category. They clearly felt a strong murderous intent emanating from their lord's body. Not only did they feel uncomfortable, but the warhorses around them were also affected. Bai Ning didn't care about the injuries on his body. He was speechless and said, "My God, how many people has my lord killed?" To cultivate such a murderous aura, it was probably not enough to kill 1,000 people. She probably needed to kill 10,000 people. No matter how many times he tried, Bai Ning couldn't associate his lord, who was usually playful, angry, and talkative, with her decisive killing on the battlefield. It was like he couldn't bear to see Li Hanmei kill people on the battlefield with a gun and go home to pick up a sweater to knit. Jiang Pingji acted as if she didn't hear Bai Ning's complaints. She gave several military orders in a row. The enemies who caught up were shocked when they saw the formation. Some of the generals couldn't help but sneer. Are the troops under Lu Shi's command indulging in fantasy? Isn't that right? Now they're like stray dogs. How can a group of defeated generals and soldiers make a comeback? Some people sneered. Naturally, there were also people who were secretly shocked. Some even had the idea of fighting back. The reinforcements who arrived late didn't see it, but the first batch of soldiers who surrounded Bai Ning saw a miracle again. The sky full of arrows was blocked by a layer of strange golden ripples. The gods had personally participated in the battle. They were just a group of ordinary people. Could they defeat the gods? Thus, one wave of soldiers had high morale while the other wave had low morale. When the two were compared, the effect was very obvious. No matter how the general scolded them, the group of soldiers did not dare to move forward. Some of them even muttered things like, "God is coming," and "God will curse us to death." Their legs were trembling and their hands were weak. They were so scared that they pushed back. Seeing this, the general could only attack angrily. He chopped off the heads of 3 or 4 deserters, intimidating the group of soldiers in an instant. Whoever dares to take a step back will end up like this. The soldiers at the front were still dealing with the enemy, but these cowards actually wanted to desert. It was better for them to die so as not to affect the morale of the army. The soldier cried, "It's not that we want to escape. It's obviously that God is here. God is here. Arrows can't hurt them." The general sneered, "Can't injure him? Spouting nonsense and disturbing the morale of the army, this is a crime worthy of death." After saying that, the general cut off the soldier's head. Because he used a lot of strength, he even cut off half of the soldier's upper body. After killing more than 10 people in a row, the chaos was finally suppressed. The cowardly soldiers could only charge forward again. The general revealed a disdainful sneer and shook off the warm blood on the blade. What God? What can't hurt them? If they had this ability, what happened to those enemy soldiers who died tragically because of their sneak attack? The two armies fought fiercely and both sides suffered casualties. Didn't they see that the enemy not only had the corpses of their own soldiers, but also the corpses of the enemy soldiers? What God? It's just a cheap trick to shake the morale of the army. What happened at the front line? Fan Shin came late and did not see the miracle. He only saw some of the soldiers being afraid to fight and disrupting the army formation, so he sent people out to suppress them. The general cupped his fists and reported, "It's just the enemy deliberately mystifying things, using some miracle to scare people." Fan Shin raised his eyebrows. "Miracle? What miracle?" The general roughly explained the process. Fan Shin frowned after listening. Is there something wrong?" the general asked. Fan Shin suddenly thought of something. His expression was faintly excited, and the hand holding the reins trembled slightly. His breathing was rapid and excited, and he almost lost his voice. "Maybe Lu Shi is also here." The general's eyes widened as if he did not hear what Fan Shin said. What did he mean by, "Lu Shi is also here"? Fan Shin said, "Lu Shi is a person with unparalleled combat power. According to investigations, during the 3 years she was studying in Langya County, she often fought fiercely with others. Now that she has become a duke, she still does not change her bad habits. She goes to the front line to fight generals, and even more, she even wants to get involved in a chaotic battle between 2 armies." This was not the first time the general had heard this, but he always found it unbelievable. Why did the people always say, "Good men don't become soldiers, good women don't marry"? It was not only because being a soldier was lowly and difficult to stand out, but also because the survival rate was low. No one wanted to bring up their own son or new husband to fight on the battlefield. From this, it could be seen how touching the survival rate was and how dangerous the battle between the two armies was. Dignified dukes actually fought in a chaotic battle like ordinary soldiers. What would happen if they were mistakenly killed in front of the battle? Not to mention dukes, ordinary generals would not personally participate in a chaotic battle. Even if they participated in the battle to kill, they would bring 20 to 30 bodyguards with them. Soldiers were easy to find, but generals who knew how to fight were not easy to find. Every one of them was considered a gold mine, and they could not be lost. Generals were like this, let alone dukes? Lu Shi left Zhanjiang Pass? Fan Chen sneered. That so-called miracle has only appeared twice. According to the thinking of the ancients, not everyone could be blessed by the gods. They only knew of Jiang Pingji. It was the same miracle, so could it be confirmed that Jiang Pingji was also at the front line? If that was the case, Fan Chen could not easily let her go. Jiang Pingji still had no heir. If she died here, the power she left behind would definitely collapse. Fan Chen was secretly calculating, but Jiang Pingji, the person in question, seemed to be on steroids. She killed people so quickly that even her own people were afraid. The enemies in front of her were not like living people, but more like straws in the field. She was not holding a sickle to cut straws, she was clearly driving a reaper to reap the heads of rows of people. This was not the scariest thing. The scariest thing was that after killing so many people, her eyes were still clear. What did this prove? It only proved that the enemies were not human in her eyes. Perhaps they were not even comparable to chickens and ducks. Ordinary people would feel uncomfortable killing too many chickens. Fortunately, this person was their lord and not their enemy. Because it was dark at night and their field of vision was limited, Fan Chen and the others had not noticed this area. He ordered the troops to split up and attack the rear. As soon as the troops were mobilized, Jiang Pingji knew his plan. Fengjing, go to the rear and command. The enemies are coming. She retreated after killing for a while. As soon as she approached, Qin Gong smelled the suffocating smell of blood. Yes. Chapter 1533. As soon as Fan Chen moved, Jiang Pingji knew that the sneak attack from the rear had failed. Instead, they had lost a lot of troops. I wonder how the battle at Zhanjiang Pass is. Jiang Pingji was already covered in blood. She looked terrifying, but the blood belonged to the enemy. Not even a strand of her hair was missing. There was a beep next to her ear. The old chief had sent her a private message. Your Abba. If you want to know what's going on over there, just use your spiritual realm. Don't tell me you're that weak. Jiang Pingji had transmigrated and changed into an ordinary person's body. It was understandable that her physical skills had declined, but it was not to the extent that her spiritual realm was weak. Lu Shi is an ordinary person. Excessive use of the spiritual realm will cause harm to this body. Besides, I haven't used it for years. I can't remember it now. Jiang Pingji smiled awkwardly. Her smile was covered by blood. Sincerity could not be seen. Instead, there was a hint of ferocity. It's not a good thing to be at ease for too long. I'm really worried that I won't be able to adapt to the pace of the Federation in the future. Although she said that, she still used her spiritual realm to take a look at the battle at Zhanjiang Pass. The city gate was secure. It had not been lost. The enemy had not succeeded yet. She quickly retracted it after taking a look. At the same time, Wuxia looked in a certain direction outside Zhanjiang Pass. His eyes showed some confusion. Just now I seem to have sensed the Lord. Was it an illusion? There were 150,000 enemies outside Zhanjiang Pass. Their battle cries shook the heavens. Flames soared into the sky and lit up the place until it was a city that never slept. With the previous lesson, Wuxia had brought enough troops and hundreds of catapults. The power of the siege was far greater than the previous time. As the saying goes, soldiers with arms and water with earth. No matter how many catapults the enemy had, the city gate was still secure. It was just that the battle on the city wall was particularly fierce. The stench of kerosene stimulated everyone's nerves. In everyone's eyes there was nothing else but the enemy. Tonight it was either the enemy or they who would die. What a tough bone to chew. He can still defend in this situation. The general of the Nye camp looked at the city wall covered with ladders and ropes. His expression was full of malice and ferocity. His black eyes were reflected by the flames. Wuxia said, Lu Shi's vigilance is far beyond our imagination. If a sudden attack was launched, the defending side would not be prepared and would most likely be flustered. According to Niel Yang's plan before his death, Jiang Pingji was confident that she would dispatch the army to pursue the bait they had thrown out. The garrison at Zhanjiang Pass would be greatly weakened. They took advantage of the night to attack the city, and the enemy hastily responded. Faced with the Nye family's army that went all out, even if Jiang Pingji's side could resist for a while, they would definitely not be able to defend Zhanjiang Pass. In order to protect themselves, they could only lead their troops to abandon the pass and retreat. The result was a huge disappointment. Wei Long led his troops to attack Zhanjiang Pass. Although the enemy hastily responded to the battle, they did not immediately collapse. Reinforcements arrived just in time. Jiang Pingji was far more cautious and meticulous than he and Ye Liang had imagined. She was clearly a 22 or 23-year-old woman, but her way of doing things was more cautious and cunning than a 45-year-old man. She had already believed the news of Nye Jun's retreat, and in the end she even ordered Zhanjiang Pass to be on high alert to prevent night attacks. He really didn't know whether he should say that she was doing something superfluous, or praise her for being as cunning as a fox, treacherous and suspicious. The general said fiercely, "So what if we're vigilant? We must pass this trial tonight." This time, Nye Jun was determined to take down Zhanjiang Pass. If they did not succeed this time, they did not know when the next opportunity would come. Of course, we must pass Zhanjiang Pass tonight. No matter what price they had to pay. Looking at the huge fireballs being hurled by the catapults onto the walls of Zhanjiang Pass, the battlements and even the city gates, Wei Long's state of mind was extremely calm. That Shi Zhong is still somewhat useful. Shi Zhong had been randomly slashed a few times by bandits with a hatchet. His right hand could not write for a short period of time. The wound on his cheek was too deep, causing his left eye to be completely blind. There was also an extremely long wound from his left shoulder to his collarbone. With such a serious injury, even if he had amazing willpower to copy and memorize the blueprint, his hands were not strong enough. He could not draw such a detailed blueprint at all. Since he could not draw, he thought of a plan and simply verbally explained. He verbally improved the existing armaments, such as coating the stones of the catapults with a layer of kerosene and igniting them before they were hurled. The lethality of fireballs and simple stones was not the same. After Shi Zhong's improvements, the catapults did indeed cause great pressure to the pass. Without Jiang Pingji, the godly archer, and due to the weather, the soldiers controlling the ballistae could not effectively destroy the enemy's catapults. After such a long time, they had only destroyed 4 or 5 catapults. In desperation, Wei Ci could only order the catapults on the city walls to aim at the enemy's catapults. The efficiency was much higher than destroying the catapults with the ballistae. At the same time, they could also target the enemy's archers. There was still a stalemate above and below the city walls. For the time being, Zhanjiang Pass was not in danger of being lost. Jiang Pingji's side was much more relaxed. Even if the enemy outnumbered them, with her precise command, she could always make the enemy suffer losses. Not only that, she also took the time to ask the old chief about it, lest she forgot about it after the war. I remember before the old chief retired, he once mentioned awakening. What is that? Yuaba, you're still half-hearted in war. If your subordinates knew about this, how would they feel? Don't change the topic. There was silence on the other side for a while, as if she had to rack her brains to think of a few sentences. Yuaba, about this matter? Sigh, the child has no mother. It's a long story. Make the long story short. Yuaba, the current power system of the Federation focuses on developing the limits of the human body. The key lies in the genes. Under normal circumstances, the genes of ordinary people will evolve with the development of inheritance from generation to generation. However, some geniuses can condense the evolution of hundreds or even thousands of years into a few short years. This is genetic unlocking, completely unlocking the shackles and exploding the limits of the human body. However, no one can answer how many genetic locks exist. Perhaps the end is the eternal life that all scientists dream of. Jiang Pingji frowned slightly. Yuaba, I'm going off topic. The awakening I mentioned is essentially similar to genetic unlocking, but it's also different. The latter is to develop the potential of the human body, while the former is to trace back to the source and return to the ancestral inheritance. Why do you think the direct descendants of the Jiang family were attacked by the forces of the heavenly brain? Because the direct descendants of the Jiang family have an ancient bloodline. You are the last direct descendant and at the same time, the only one who has the chance to awaken the ancestral power. This power is what the defector heavenly brain fears the most. Only you can completely kill it. What if? I can't awaken? You Abba, die. The Federation will be buried with you. Don't worry, I'll mail you the best coffin. Heartless woman. Jiang Pingji curled her lips. No, this body belongs to Lu Shi. How can I awaken? You Abba. The ancient bloodline of the Jiang family is rather special. It doesn't attach to the body but to the soul. Jiang Pingji lowered her eyes as if remembering something. The awakening thing can change hair color? Chapter 1534. Changing gender? So vicious? Jiang Pingji said that, but her eyes lit up. She was eager to try. You Abba, what do you want to do? Based on her understanding of Jiang Pingji, it was probably not a good thing. She had no integrity at all. Jiang Pingji said, well, we are all adults. Let's not beat around the bush. I want to cry Zixiao. Your Abba, you should really let your little girl see what kind of animal you are. What kind of tricks are you thinking about? Jiang Pingji muttered, just tell me if it's possible. You Abba, no, give up. The Jiang family's atavistic ability is fire control. It doesn't support gender change. Fire control? Jiang Pingji couldn't help but complain, isn't this the same ability derived from unlocking my genes? She thought it would be some amazing special ability. In the end, it was just playing with fire. You Abba, it's different. Before the awakening, it was normal fire. After the awakening, the fire can burn everything. It's said to be the fire of extreme yang that can cleanse everything. Even the Federation's warships with the strongest defense can't withstand the damage of that kind of fire. Not only can it burn physical bodies, but it can also burn spiritual energy and life. Awakening the ancient bloodline ability, apart from the change of the fire, will also strengthen the body by 100 times. At the same time, it will greatly increase one's lifespan. Sky Brain hated the direct descendants of the Jiang family. Besides the old grudge from 2,000 years ago, there was another reason. Jiang Pingji echoed, it's really good. I won't need flint to start a fire in the future. You Abba. To be honest, if your ancestors heard what you said, they would most likely die with grievances. Including Jiang Pingji, there were only 3 awakened in 2,000 years. The first 2 were famous people who killed so many enemies of the Federation that they were terrified. But Jiang Pingji used them to start a fire? Be a little more promising, okay? Jiang Pingji couldn't help but roll her eyes. What was the use of her ability no matter how amazing it was? The enemy was a group of ordinary people. In order not to bully them, she restrained her spiritual domain. What else could she do? Jiang Pingji couldn't help but complain, if I don't use it to start a fire, what else can I do? Didn't the old chief just say that the fire after awakening can burn spiritual energy? In the words of this era, the human spirit is the so-called 3 souls and 7 spirits. This fire of mine is enough to extinguish a person's soul. It's just a war, there's no need to be so ruthless. All in all, this is a useless cheat. For the current her, it was indeed useless. Your Abba. His words were reasonable and no one could refute him. Jiang Pingji's current state was like a main account with a full set of godly equipment going to the beginner's village. She could still defeat all the other players in the village without her godly equipment. To put it bluntly, it was meaningless to give her a set of godly equipment at that moment. The old commander felt that he should redeem himself. Your Abba, don't underestimate it. It will be very useful in the future. The old chief went offline, leaving Jiang Pingji with a lot of questions. Jiang Pingji looked at the chaotic battle and took a deep breath. She told herself again and again that this was a battle between ordinary people. She had to restrain herself. Although Jiang Pingji had been talking to the old chief for a few minutes, she did not stop killing the enemies. No matter if it was an enemy or a comrade, no one would have thought that Jiang Pingji could still be distracted by talking to someone while she was on a killing spree. If they knew, they would be so depressed that they would vomit blood. Of course, Fan Qin and the others were depressed enough. No matter how they ambushed or how they deployed their troops to attack, the enemy seemed to have predicted their actions in advance. Their defense was impenetrable. Even if they outnumbered the enemy by a lot, they did not have much of an advantage. At that moment, news came from the front line. Military advisor, the enemy has a valiant general. His combat power is really terrifying. The soldiers can't stop him at all. This statement was embellished. In fact, the soldiers in that area were scared out of their wits. Almost no one dared to advance and attack. If they did not take any measures, the enemy might use that area as a breakthrough and counterattack. Fan Qin asked, terrifying? How terrifying can he be? 100 people can't do anything to him. Fan Chen frowned slightly. It seemed that he did not expect Jiang Pingji to have such an inhuman existence. To describe someone's bravery, people always like to use, one man can hold the pass against 10,000, or one man can fight against 100. Whether it was 10,000, or one man can fight against 100, the words 10,000 and 100 were empty words. The general idea was that there were many people, not really 10,000 or 100. Even if it was a highly skilled general, when faced with hundreds of enemies, he would most likely lose his life. No matter how skilled he was, he had 2 hands and 2 feet. There was a limit to his physical strength. It was impossible for him to not be tired or injured. If Jiang Pingji really had such a general under her command, she should have some reputation. Unless, a light flashed in Fan Chen's mind. He suddenly thought of something. He just speculated that Jiang Pingji was very likely to be at the front of the battle. At that moment, a young general with unparalleled bravery appeared. Could it be, how is Lu Shi's combat power? He asked the deputy general beside him. This deputy general was someone who had seen Jiang Pingji fight generals at the front of the battle. The deputy general answered honestly, "This person is a brave general that is rare in the world. If I were to fight him, I wouldn't last more than half a cup of tea." Jiang Pingji had fought generals at the front of the battle and killed several people in a row. Those generals were all ranked highly in the Nye camp. "Why are you suddenly asking about this, military counselor?" Fan Chen said, "Take a guess. Is it possible that the young general who reported to us just now is Lu Shi?" The deputy general was shocked by Fan Chen's speculation. Is this possible?" He expressed that he did not understand the way the vassal's brain worked. It was fine to fight generals. If one's martial strength was high, there was a high chance of survival in a one-on-one fight. However, it was a chaotic battle now. The soldiers of the 2 armies could only rely on the color of the cloth tied around their armors, necks, or arms to distinguish between the enemy and their allies. As a vassal, it was fine that she did not stay at the rear and came to launch a sneak attack. Now she even dared to intervene in a chaotic battle. He admired her for being a man. Fan Chen said coldly, "There is a 70% to 80% chance that it is accurate." Even if it was not accurate, Fan Chen wanted this young general to die here. Jiang Pingji had such a capable general under her command. It would greatly boost the morale of the 2 armies when they fought. It would be a disaster to keep him alive. Fan Chen's speculation was naturally correct. The person who was unrestrained and killed 300 enemy troops in a short time of half a stick of incense was Jiang Pingji. "I feel like my identity has been exposed." After a while, Jiang Pingji clearly felt that the enemy was deliberately targeting her. Chapter 1535. The enemy underestimated the power of the iron whip. When they aimed their long spears at White, which was under Jiang Pingji's crotch, Jiang Pingji waved her long whip and tied up all their spears like a snake. She exerted strength in her wrists and easily snatched the spears from the hands of more than a dozen people. She flicked her whip again and returned the spears to the enemy. Some pierced through the cheeks, some aimed at the neck, and some pierced through the heart. They couldn't even touch Whitey, let alone hurt Jiang Pingji. That was a pain in the ass. Fan Chen was extremely dissatisfied with the progress. So many people couldn't take down one person? His warhorse is still full of vigor and vitality? The general said, "It's not that we are incompetent, it's because the enemy is too evil." Not to mention Jiang Pingji, the horse she was riding was evil. No matter how many people tried to stab the horse with their spears, they always hit an invisible but real barrier and couldn't move an inch. The soldiers were confused by the change. While they were in a daze, the general on the horse used his iron whip to sweep away the spears or directly hit the heads of the soldiers who surrounded him. It was not an exaggeration. The strength of the iron whip could really break the neck and send the head flying. The deputy general didn't even know how to describe how bloody and violent the scene was. Fan Chen said, "It's really Lu Shi. No matter what price we have to pay, we can't let this person live." The general sighed secretly and cupped his hands in acknowledgement. In order to arouse the fighting spirit of his soldiers, he directly called out Jiang Pingji's identity. As the saying goes, brave men are bound to be rewarded with a great reward. Under Fan Chen's instruction, the general showed the reward. "This person is Lu Shi, the feudal lord. Whoever can take his head will be rewarded with 100,000 taels of gold and a title of nobility." 100,000 taels of gold? A title of nobility? The high reward made the eyes of the timid soldiers red. One by one they rushed forward without a care for their lives. They were soldiers who hung their heads on their waistbands. There was no tomorrow and they didn't know when they would be able to stand out. Now that there was an opportunity in front of them, they had to fight for it even if it meant risking their lives. Maybe they could steal Jiang Pingji's head. Now that he had obtained the head, he would be rewarded with 100,000 gold coins and a noble title. He would only need to enjoy it for the rest of his life. When Jiang Pingji's identity was exposed, Bai Ning and the other two hurriedly sent soldiers to escort Jiang Pingji to retreat, but their lord refused. A bunch of trash wants my head? Jiang Pingji felt humiliated. Not to mention a group of ordinary soldiers, even her colleagues from her previous life did not have the confidence to take her head.